Tonight's story was written by the talented P.F. McGrail. Check the link in the description to find their book on Amazon. First, do no harm. Learning the rules of residency. Now on to tonight's story. I was washing my hair with bar soap while pissing in the shower when I really considered how shitty my life had become. I couldn't afford both soap and shampoo, so I had to improvise. And sneaking into my college's gym when I probably shouldn't have been there meant time was of the essence. So I didn't have the luxury of lounging around at the urinal. Dirty clothes can be used as a towel, which is a clever trick I learned while trying to save money on towels. It doesn't feel so clever upon remembering that you're out of quarters, and therefore out of clean clothes, when your dirty garments are now dripping wet, and you have to race out of the gym with an unpleasantly warm and moist ass crack. I would have done a nude air dry after getting home, but home was the back seat of my car this week. I really didn't want to explain to the cops a second time that I wasn't masturbating in my blue-green Toyota Corolla, but was just trying to get a breeze on my taint. I had to focus on making it to the next week. My buddy Tony said I could crash on his floor for a few days, which is fucking awesome. Not only does he have a second towel that doubles as a blanket, but he also has an overlooked jar of mayonnaise, which means breakfast every day. I freaked out when someone knocked on my window because I always freak out when someone wakes me up while I'm sleeping in my car. Cops and meth heads both want money, and I'm not able to provide for either one. So things usually end up poorly. This guy was neither. With a black fedora and a black trench coat, flanking a long, gray face, he would have been goth chic if he weren't 30 years past teenagerhood. Raymond Salak? He called through the glass. I always kept my car window rolled up. I used to leave it open a crack so I could breathe, but some asshole slid a coat hanger through the gap one time and unlocked the door, leaving me with a broken nose so they could steal 19 dimes and 13 pennies from my dash. I looked around blearily. Was I wearing pants? Yes, they were the same ones I'd put on yesterday after the shower. I realized this because the crotch always dries last when your clothes get wet, and that reality jolted me awake. I sat upright and focused. This guy could easily be a threat. I had to play it cool, letting him know that I was intelligent enough to be aware of my surroundings, while also confident and cunning enough to use every hidden advantage to my benefit. Who the fuck are you? I asked him stupidly. Call me Advocatus. He smiled without happiness. Why don't you roll your window down so that we can chat? Or better yet, why don't you come out of your car? It didn't seem like a great idea, but I was already wearing pants, so I figured the day had started well enough for me to take my chances. I climbed out of the car and remembered that my key was inside as I was closing it. I didn't scream or yell, I just sighed, leaned against the door, feeling very forgotten. Mr. Salak, I'm here to tell you that you have not been forgotten, he explained in a deep, nasally voice as he folded his hands over his briefcase handle. I really didn't know how to play this. Part of me wished that I had Tony's mayonnaise, because it had expired 4 weeks earlier and really had a kick that got my mind running in the morning. If you think I haven't been forgotten, then you've got the wrong Raymond Salak, I mumbled as I rubbed my eyes. The wrong Raymond Salak who lives in a 1999 Toyota Corolla? He asked with one brow raised. Yes, I answered uncomfortably, trying to make myself appear very small. The wrong Raymond Salak from Brunswick, Maine, who's currently attending Bowdoin College on an academic scholarship that doesn't cover the housing he hasn't been able to afford since both of his parents died in a car crash last year. Advocatus pressed on calmly. Yeah, must be. I really, really wish I hadn't left my keys in my car. I wanted to escape. I tried to think about where I might go. That's when I decided to stay put. Look, man, I don't know what you want from me. My scholarship runs through the end of the semester, and then I'll have nothing left to my name. I realize it might be against the law to sleep in my car, but I'm trying to avoid affecting anyone who might be offended by my presence. I'm just trying to hang on until I can't. I sighed and fell into a squat. That's great. You must not know about your great-aunt Mary, to whom you're the only living relative. You just inherited her mansion. He opened his briefcase and handed me a folder. Oh? I said as I took it from him. And you're sure that I'm the correct Raymond Salak in a 1999 blue-green Toyota Corolla? Mr. Advocatus slowly looked up the street, then turned and looked down the other way. I'll tell you what. If a second one of you comes along, you two can split the inheritance evenly. I looked down at the mansion nestled up against the Androscoggin River. It somehow settled warmly into the surrounding environs while sharply declaring its carefully planned New England starkness to all who passed by. Which wasn't that many. This was a luxury retreat, free from all unpleasant trappings like traffic or other people. So this is the house? I asked Mr. Advocatus incredulously. It's just mine? Well, you have to pay an inheritance tax. Fortunately, the trust fund covers that amount, with exactly enough left over earmarked for 20 years' worth of property taxes. He explained matter-of-factly. Ah, I responded. Yes, it's a beautiful house, he continued as he pulled a sheet of paper out of his briefcase. You just have to follow this list of rules. Oh, god damn it, I shot back. Are you kidding me? I knew there was a catch. Is this house supposed to be haunted? Is that it? Will bad things happen if I break one of the rules? I was breathing heavily, so I forced myself to calm down. Look, I'm sorry. It's just a lot, you know? Mr. Advocatus held his unaffected smile, the paper ready for me to take it, as it wafted gently in the breeze. Honestly, it seemed like a dumbass idea to accept the list. I took the list. Is this everything? I asked, still incredulous. I can just move in? It's all yours, Mr. Salak, Advocatus responded. Enjoy your new home. I nodded, then turned and dazedly walked towards the front lawn. Mr. Salak. This had to be another catch. I turned around to face him. He tossed me the Corolla keys. Follow the rules. Things may surprise you. I thought that claiming the biggest bedroom would make me happiest, but it just highlighted how few possessions I had when a pile of books and dirty clothes fought against the emptiness. But I'd already hauled a stack of logs to the fireplace and dragged a mattress into the otherwise barren room, so I decided to settle in. It was dark by then. I started a fire and huddled close. Do you know what you imagine is nearby when nothing is nearby? Everything. The emptiness of the room grew large as I huddled closer to the fire, realizing for the first time that I had no idea if I even had central heat or electricity. There was a lot I didn't know about this house. Why did a closet on the third story need a lock on the outside? What was the purpose of a window that led straight to an interior brick chimney? Why did it take 3 times as long to walk through the house as it did to walk around its perimeter? My eyes wandered to my pocket. I dismissed it at first, but where else did I have to turn? I slowly unfolded the list of rules, holding it close to the crackling fire so I could read it more clearly. Rules for Hill Street House. 1. Never light a fire after dark. 2. Knock on every door of the second story at least once a day. This keeps curious hands on the other side. 3. Avoid the blue room at the end of the 3rd floor hall. If you must go in, keep your eyes pointed downward the entire time, no matter what you hear. 4. Always sleep with your bedroom door closed. If you close it but hear footsteps in the room before falling asleep, then it entered well before you had a chance to shut it out. Nope. I folded that shit up without reading the rest and set it aside. I don't do this haunting shit. Mostly because I'm a skeptic. And the part that isn't skeptical wants nothing to do with any such nonsense. So I figured dear Aunt Mary could take her rules into heaven or hell with her. I still closed the door, though. And I put out the fire. Then I went to bed because this day had been wild enough for an entire year, and I wanted to enjoy my mansion without giving myself a heart attack. The room was much quieter than I was used to as I tried to fall asleep. And it was much darker without streetlights illuminating the inside of my car while I drifted off. That, of course, let my imagination play tricks on me. The settling of an old wooden house sounded just like footsteps, especially when they were so rhythmic, like they were walking toward me. It was particularly difficult to ignore the fact that they came at regular intervals. I wrapped my arms around my ears and closed my eyes. Creak, step, creak, step. I really wish I hadn't started that fire. Creak, step, or ignored the rules. Creak. I should have known this house came with a cost. The air pressure changed just slightly, as though someone were standing over me. I kept my eyes closed despite the darkness. Fear is nothing but imagination run amok, right? I could dismiss minor sensory overreactions. I could not dismiss the pressure that descended onto the edge of my mattress, which felt exactly like a man sitting down by my side. The pressure moved toward me, my heart racing. It felt like 2 hands crawling along the bed, one placed in front of the other as it got nearer and nearer. I didn't move. Cold air caressed my face in the exact cadence of human breath. I had to move. I opened my eyes to total darkness, but I knew it was there. Look, I realized that I didn't put out the fire or shut the door, whatever it was that you expected me to do, because I only read part of that damn list and ignored the rest, but here's the thing. I'm going to be in a scary place no matter what, whether it's people or ghosts of people haunting me. So I have to ask, do you have a body? Something huffed and a cold burst of air rushed over my face. Okay, I'm going to assume you don't. So what are you going to do to me that a meth head couldn't? Or more importantly, what kinds of things can a meth head pull off that are simply impossible for an entity with no body? Silence. Right. So here's the thing. You might be scary, but you're dead. And this is my house now. My heart was beating hard enough to threaten my eardrums. So we're all going to have to learn to coexist. Because whatever crazy shit you have in store is worth the cost of rent, which is nothing. Get it? I was panting in fear, but determined to finish. A light burst of air whispered past my ear. I could have sworn it was confused. Bitch, it means that now I'm haunting you. I dropped back down to the mattress and wrapped my arms around my ears once more. So learn to live with it. Or whatever it is you do. Tomorrow we can draft a new list of rules. These things are going to be different around here. Good night. Morning wood, am I right? I had reached for my crotch to get a little wake-me-up zazz going when I realized that something felt off. I opened my eyes. I was in the bedroom I'd inherited, but everything was wrong. The mattress had been moved to the other side of the room, with me still in it, providing a full view of the cavernous space. Bare, sooty footprints led from the fireplace to where the mattress had originally been. Those prints then turned and proceeded to my mattress's current location, before pacing the room, heading to the corner, proceeding 10 feet up the wall, coming back down and stopping again by my bed. There they simply disappeared, as though their owners had never left. Even more bizarre was the fact that the footprints transitioned in size. They started looking like adult treads, then slowly proceeded to the shape of a small child, before growing larger again as they paced. They were over 2 feet long by the time they reached my bedside. The hair on my neck slowly rose. I wanted to cry. But the no rent thing limited my options to stay here. That's it. My list of options was just the one option. So that's why I live in a haunted house. I simply can't afford a better neighborhood. Okay, pal. Is this how it's gonna be? I asked groggily as I tumbled out of bed. Do you really think I'm above pissing in your precious fireplace? Because, surprise, I'm not. I should have considered the smell before I started. But I'm not usually running on all 5 cylinders before that first scoop of mayonnaise. Now the fireplace is muddy ash. Remember that next time you put your bare feet in it. I zipped up and headed out of the room. This is my house now. And we're living by my rules. That's how I learned not to piss off a haunted house. I've got a question for you, I asked the man in the black trench coat on my front porch. How did I know you were at the door? I didn't hear a bell, but I knew you were there. Mr. Advocatus smiled that not-so-friendly smile. I'm not here to tell you how the house communicates with those held inside. He opened his omnipresent briefcase and pulled out a sheet of paper. Your great Aunt Mary has some requests for you. Okay, what the hell? I asked, taking the paper that I knew I would regret taking. Why didn't you just give me all the bad news at once yesterday? Because you might not have taken the house, he responded casually. Well, yes, there's a distinct possibility you might be very right. He was silent. You know I had a strange-ass night here last night, didn't you? He was silent. I sighed. Okay, what does my dead great Aunt Mary want me to do with this godforsaken place? I asked as I looked over the paper. A select clientele will find their way to you. Your job is to extract a fair payment. I raised an eyebrow. That's it? Too good to be true, right? He responded brightly. Oh, and wear a different pair of pants when your guests arrive. I looked down. God damn morning wood. I spent the day trying to build a new routine. No longer my place of residence, the Corolla was now exclusively used for commuting to campus in town, where most of my classmates lived in the Bodouin dorms. It was odd going into classrooms that were smaller than my new bedroom. I had no idea how to explain the situation, so I told people I was camping by the river, because that was less weird than the truth. Besides, I didn't want them asking to come over to when my strange-ass house guest was scheduled to show up. I mean, sure, I could have chosen not to let this house guest in, but since I'd opened up a urine front in the war against my mansion, I didn't want to break any more rules than I had to at the moment. When I found myself at the front door, again with no idea how I knew someone was waiting for me, the guy looked kind of okay. Sure, he was kind of scuzzy. Basically, he seemed like a guy who'd never changed his freshman year hygiene habits as he aged into his 40s. Raymond Salak? He asked from behind strands of greasy hair. That's me, I answered, checking to make sure I was wearing a pair of respectable jeans. So, who are you now? Call me Egal, he responded in a gravelly voice. You cool if I drink in the backyard? He asked while holding up a 6-pack of Cedar Mountain Ice. My eyes grew wide. Where'd you find that? It's the only beer I've ever seen that sells for less than $4 a 12-pack. You can drink wherever you want if you're willing to share. Anyway, that's how I found out I have a backyard. It's gigantic and heads right down into the Androscoggin River. It's where Egal showed me his pills. It's a win-win, my friend, he cooed unpleasantly. You scout the girls, freshmen will drink anything, and you don't need too much Rohypnol to get the job done. He crushed his beer can, belched, then threw the trash at a bush, which he missed. Then he slid me a crisp $100 bill. That's an advance. I'll pay for each girl you convince to meet me outside. He smiled, and I could see that he was missing several teeth. I'll take care of the rest. I'm not proud of what I did, but I had a giant mansion with no food inside. What options did I have? I took the money. Egal clapped a hand on my shoulder and pulled me close as we made our way back into the house. His breath smelled of cheap beer and regret. Raymond Salak, he slurred, I've got the ability to make you a very rich man. He slurped up a bubble of drool. Where am I sleeping? What the fuck, Advocatus? Why'd he set me up with this douche nozzle? A select clientele will find their way to you. Your job is to extract a fair payment. What possible reason could I have had for being in the eye of this shitstorm? I wondered this as we staggered through a kitchen that was equipped with more appliances than I knew how to use. There had to be a mix-up somewhere down the line. I hadn't even read the list of rules. I stopped. A thought had crossed my mind, but I didn't like it. Still, there was no other apparent way to unite Advocatus' advice with the list of rules and this creeper who would be sleeping in my home. Was it the right call? I turned around to evaluate the guy. Egal was pissing on my fridge. That's when I remembered more of Advocatus' advice. Follow the rules. Things may surprise you. Oh, I get it, House. This is revenge for the fireplace, isn't it? I asked, completely pissed. What? Egal responded as he drunkenly stumbled, soiling a long stretch of wall and floor. I said, pack your pecker back and port. I'm taking you up to your damn room. I'd intentionally avoided the third-floor hallway up to this point. The pressure increased as I slowly proceeded along it, like I was a swimmer, ever deeper underwater. Egal didn't seem to notice. The door at the end of the hall was open just a crack. A soft blue glow emitted from within. I didn't want to open the door, but like every other survival instinct I'd had in the past 2 days, I ignored it. Nausea seeped through my pores as I stepped into the room. I kept my eyes glued to the wooden planks of the floor. here's your room. I have to go. Do you need anything? I didn't know or care if the room had a bed or furniture or anything at all. I just wanted out of there. It smelled wrong, and bizarre memories floated back with incredibly twisted details. Egal stood next to me and remained silent. I went quietly into the hall and closed the door behind me. I'm not proud of what I did, but I had a giant mansion with no food inside. What options did I have? I had taken his money while intending to screw him over. Whether or not the house shared my intentions was his problem now. I really didn't want to go back into my extra haunted room in search of the creepiest man I'd ever met. But when Egal hadn't emerged by the next night, it became clear that I needed to head into the blue room in search of him. The hallway filled my ears with the same pressure as I approached. My eyes were tearing up by the time I reached the doorknob. It was unlocked. I kept my eyes pointed at the floor as I stepped into the room. I didn't like waving my arms in front of me, but the thought of seeing was more terrifying than the notion of feeling. So I reached into the shadows. The air pressure in the room changed significantly as I stepped forward. It felt like I was outside. No echoes or reverberations matched my steps. And I was cold. My arm brushed up against a man, and I nearly voided my bowels. Assuming it was Egal, I grabbed him and pulled forward. He followed stiltily like he was unsure of how to use his knees. The door was further away than I remembered. Once we were back in the hallway, I shut the latch, and finally raised my head to see if the correct, strange man was by my side. My tightening throat stifled the scream. Egal's hair had gone sheet white, and was now pointing straight out in every direction. I think he was staring at me, but I had no way of knowing. The pupils and irises had disappeared from his eyes, and only white globs stared back at me. I had resolved not to piss in any additional uncouth places, and of course that plan immediately failed. Are you really going to judge me for moistening my loins after what I saw? My creepy-ass house guest had physically transformed, and was apparently unable to communicate why his greasy black hair was now a white Q-tip. On top of that, I couldn't even make eye contact with the guy, because he no longer had a complete set of eyes. Only red veins breached the alabaster globs that should have given him sight. Egal, man, do you need, I don't know, a band-aid or a priest or something? The solutions might have been ridiculous, but so was my situation. Was there a right way to address a man whose head had been fried? Maybe I should have taken his vitals or something, but I was one jump scare away from a panic attack, and really didn't want to take my chances by getting too close. Just being in that hallway was nearly enough to send me over the edge. The unnatural pressure in my ears made me want to puke. I needed to get out of there. So I took a tentative step backward. Egal followed in my direction, a tiny droplet of drool jiggling from his lip like stray tapioca. I took 3 quick steps back, and he followed with 3 jilted steps forward. The drool fell onto his shirt as he walked. I turned and headed briskly down the hall. He proceeded at the best pace he could, with what appeared to be a damaged sense of balance. Oh, fuck, are you really going to follow me around like this? I asked the empty space that was Egal's head. He either didn't or couldn't speak, and he was clearly blind, so his only response was to totter after me. I picked up speed and headed back to my room. You better figure out how to balance, man, because I am not carrying you down these stairs. He tumbled violently down the stairs. Oh, for fuck's sake, my guy, get your shit together. I admonished as he spat broken teeth out of his mouth like half-chewed corn. Then he got up and continued after me. So I broke into a jog. And he responded with a lumbering run. Panicking, I reached for my doorknob and yanked it open as I turned back to face him. "Stop following me!" I screeched in a voice that sounded much less masculine than I had intended. He skidded to a halt, then flopped down onto the hallway floor. "The fuck?" I asked. "Do you have to do anything I say?" Egal drooled. "Lift your arm." His wrist shot up like a puppeteer had yanked on an invisible string. "Now, slap yourself around a little." He smacked his own cheek back and forth, hitting his target about half the time, which was actually pretty impressive considering his newfound lack of coordination. Now that he was busy, I slid into my room and shut the door behind me. I was greeted with haunted footprints and the smell of urine ash. The subtle reminders of just how haunted this place was were rather unpleasant. I sighed, then crossed the room and collapsed onto my mattress, closing my eyes in deep thought. What were my options? I could call the hospital, but to the best of my knowledge, there was no soul has been siphoned wing to address Egal's current needs. He'd end up as nothing more than a lab rat. The police were an option, but it wasn't a crime to erase your eyes and brain. They'd just send him to the hospital. That brought back the original problem, but would also put me in the very awkward position of just explaining what the hell I was doing with a zombie. Turning him loose on the streets of Brunswick were perhaps the most problematic approach. He'd wander around causing trouble until the police were called, and the hospital would still come into play. And I didn't have the stomach to kill him. Sure, he was a roofie-slinging sack of shit, but I couldn't bring myself to end another life. Compounding my problems was a complete inability to ask anyone for advice. There was no one who could possibly understand what I was going through. I opened my eyes. Then I stood and walked into the middle of the room. Hey, ghost person, I've got a question for you. Silence. Look, Truce, okay? I won't light fires after dark or keep doors open or closed or whatever. I'll stop pissing in the fireplace. Just, I don't know. Show me how to talk to you. Silence. So that's how it's going to be. Okay, fine. I can play that game. I called as I headed to the far end of the room. I will piss in the fireplace, and I'll keep hosing it down until you come and talk to me. I was pulling my dick out when a sudden burst of air flew directly into my ear. For fuck's sake, I shouted while beating at my ear like a spider had crawled inside. Can you not be all creepy about this? I caught my breath as my pulse slowly came back down. Well, okay, you're a ghost and everything, fine. But look, there's a whole zombie situation, and I'm trying to work with the house, despite what it might seem. So what the hell am I supposed to do with this guy who spent a night in the blue room? It felt like the mansion was holding its breath. I waited. The sound echoed from the floor in front of me. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the noise was now a little further away. Further still. It sounded like the ghost was leading me out of the room. Do you have any idea how terrifying it is to voluntarily follow a ghost because the alternative is less horrible. I followed the sounds to the door. Back in the hallway, I found Egal slapping himself on the floor. His cheeks had turned bright pink with his efforts. Shit. While I hadn't told him to keep the smacks going, I had also neglected to tell him to stop. I guess this was on me. Egal, cut that shit out. His hand fell limply to the floor, and he stared at the ceiling. Now, don't follow me. And don't slap yourself anymore. I turned to follow the knocking sounds down the hall. Oh, one more thing, I called back to Egal. Give me all the roofies you have. He pulled 3 bottles out of each pocket and dropped them to the floor. 6 of them? You're making it really hard to feel any sympathy. I scoffed as I scooped the drugs from the ground. I threw the bottles into the kitchen trash can as I followed the knocks into that room. The sounds then led me to a door in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. My head spun as I stepped through. There was a small apartment inside, and I hadn't even noticed it because the house was so damn big. The knocking stopped in the middle of the small living room. Okay, I heaved. Now what? Is there is there zombie medicine in here? Silence. What is this place? A servant's quarters? How am I supposed to find a solution for Egal's brain melting in... I stopped talking. Are you goddamn serious? Is this really what you're suggesting I do with that drooling idiot out there? Silence. I sighed. What else could I do? There were no good ways to deal with the brainless being who followed my every command. And that's how I ended up with a zombie butler. I really hate answering a door with no doorbell, I explained to Advocatus as we stood out on my front porch. I just find myself heading outside because the house slithered an idea into my head. Do you have any clue how unsettling that is? He showed no reaction. My guess is that he'd seen more than one odd happening in his circuit, as what I can only assume was a lawyer for the supernatural. We need to speak about your personal guest policy, he interjected silkily. Personal guest? I don't have any of those. How am I supposed to bring friends over to a haunted house? He pursed his lips. You should know that energies have the potential to become invigorated if there is any activity of an amorous nature, Mr. Salak. My face flushed. Wait, does this house feed you knowledge, too? Are you saying that it snitches on my masturbation? Do you have a record of who I've been thinking about? Have you been spying on me there 3 times a day? Mr. Advocatus remained stoic. I had no idea of your solitary personal practices. At least not until you told me just now. I could feel my skin turning crimson. Then a new idea flooded my mind. Wait, are you predicting that I'll have a booty call? The phrase sounded so stupid coming out of my mouth. Maybe that's why they weren't a frequent occurrence for me. Is it that girl Sarah from my physics class? I pressed, figuring my face couldn't get any redder. Do you know something about her? Sarah was a quiet, mousy wallflower that I had barely noticed before she pulled me aside after class to talk about homework for 4 full minutes. She'd wandered into my thoughts during solitary personal practice time on the reg since then. That's not the topic I'm here to discuss, he answered calmly. But I do need to detail how you might handle any overnight visitors that are not explicitly procured by me. Right. Sounds good, I explained quickly. Do you want to come in and talk it over? He looked past my shoulder at the imposing green facade of the house. No, Mr. Salek. I do not wish to go inside. That silence hung for a while. Mr. Advocatus cleared his throat. You seem to be aware that this house comes with certain conditions. I need to make you aware of exactly what might happen if prudence is not followed. I trust you've read the rules thoroughly. Yes, I lied. Good. The fifth item is of the highest priority, and it is obviously too late to correct any shortcoming at this point. God damn it. Of the 19 rules, 13 have been added after first-hand knowledge was gained as a direct result of serious incidents. I resolved to find the list, which I'd left somewhere in my room. Then I thought about bringing Sarah to my room, and I forgot about the list. Will you finish each of those tasks tonight? Asked Mr. Advocatus. Shit. I'd been daydreaming and had missed a good 40 seconds of conversation. Yeah, no problem, I answered. Excellent. I cannot stress enough how important it is to follow everything I've said. The house can have extreme reactions to the emotions surrounding romantic entanglements. My heart rate shot up to 180. I was about to get laid. At least, I thought I was. I really, really did. And I really, really, really wish I'd been paying attention to that supernatural lawyer's warnings. It's amazing how motivation flows when you believe a new person is about to touch your genitals. Egal, I called out after closing the door on Mr. Advocatus. Pick some flowers or something. The white-eyed, brainless man groaned and headed out the door. I had a spring in my step. It was time to clean my mansion, which didn't seem like a very daunting task, to be honest. I had a mattress, some dirty clothes, and what was left of the Cedar Mountain ice beer warming on the counter. There simply wasn't much to clean. I remembered the sooty footprints and drying urine mud cakes in my bedroom, but I figured that's what a zombie butler was for. I had more important tasks to complete. The list of rules had disappeared, and it was crucial to search high and low until I found it. Where had I last seen it? Yes. I'd been reading it by the fireplace in this room. I looked down at my feet and found the piece of paper. Heh, thought you could get away, I scolded the inanimate object. Now, let's see what you have to say. Rule 4, always sleep with your bedroom door closed. If you close it but hear footsteps in the room, bzz. I whipped the phone out of my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. Hey, are you free to go over the physics problem set? I'm doing mine tonight. Winky smiley face. My hands instantly started shaking. Her text had ended with a winky face. Winky faces mean sex. Sex for me. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely type. I dropped the list and focused on crafting the next perfect response. Sure. X capital D. 8:30? Waiting the right amount of time is crucial because you need to avoid seeming desperate. After 19 seconds passed, I sent my message. 13 seconds later, she responded. Roommate's having a study group over. Know where we can meet? I smiled. Mr. Advocatus, you sly dog. I opened the door to the hallway and nearly pissed myself again as I found a blank face staring back. Damn it, Egal, you scared the shit out of me. Wordlessly, he dropped a pile of dead foliage. A decomposing rose, several broken dandelions, grass clippings, and a dead bird lay at my feet. "This is what you think flowers are?" I asked, sighing. "Look, please just clean the footprints out of my room. You can do that, right?" I had rehearsed exactly what I would say upon seeing her. I needed to make Sarah feel welcome and excited, yet not appear overbearing. She was quite the minx, and would probably keep me on my toes all night with her witty banter. I opened the front door to find her standing there in an oversized sweater, oversized glasses, tight ponytail, jeans, and Converse. Something about believing in imminent coitus can cast the most beautiful sheen. My breath caught sideways against my uvula. "Hey," I gurgled. "Hey," she said. So far, so good. I stepped aside so she could enter. "So you live here?" "Yep," I answered. She scratched her nose. "You want to study?" she continued. "Yeah, sure. Follow me," I answered in a voice that I think sounded pretty smooth. Why isn't there any furniture?" she asked tentatively. Before I could think of a lie, we had arrived at my bedroom door. I opened it wide and nearly fell to the ground in shock. The sooty footprints had been altered but not erased. Streaks of ash now spelled a message in enormous letters that stretched across the floor and up the wall. "I will take what I want." I slammed the door and turned to face shocked Sarah. "Let's study in the living room," I offered eagerly. Before she could ask any questions, I had turned and started marching across the house. Upon entering a gigantic room that I may or may not have noticed before, I stopped in shock. "There's a couch under that sheet," I announced triumphantly. I moved quickly in hopes that she wouldn't question my behavior. After sliding down the couch, so that the bright moonlight could illuminate our workspace, I peeled back the sheet and plopped down. Sarah looked very confused by this point, but she followed me onto the cushion, leaving 3 feet of empty space between us. Then she pulled the physics homework from her backpack, and we started working. It was nice, for sure. We politely helped each other out, but mostly labored in quiet. I was nervous at first, but it became kind of normal in a good way. I liked having her next to me. But she did not get any closer than 3 feet. The homework was very dull. My neck ached as I raised my shoulder and shook off the slumber. Dazedly, I looked around to find that Sarah had fallen asleep on my shoulder. She felt nice against my arm. A distant voice in my head told me to let her sleep on her own tonight. I'm not sure why I trusted it, but it actually seemed to make sense. I slowly lowered her light, sleepy head down to the armrest, then pulled the sheet up to her chin. She seemed comfortable enough, so I slunk out of the room toward my own bed. It was dark enough to pretend that I couldn't see the creepy soot messages on the floor and wall. When I'm lonely or horny, or if I'm bored, heading to bed, waking up, or trying to stay alert, I tend to engage in what Mr. Advocatus called solitary personal practices. But I had a light, fuzzy warmth that stayed with me after sleeping next to Sarah, and it was enough to occupy my mind as I drifted off. I had a feeling that things would work themselves out. And they did just that when Sarah opened my door and padded over to me in the dark. Without a word, she pressed her soft, warm body against mine. The kiss was perfect. Eager, wet, and rushed with the anticipation of what was about to come. I don't know how we were both naked so quickly, but I didn't care. "Hey, do you have a condo?" I moaned as she slid my dick inside of her. Holy shit, the girl was a ball of flaming energy. She basically used me, which I was fine with, as she worked with all the sleek efficiency of a Formula One car. I was so spent that I didn't even remember passing out. My bed was empty but warm when the sun woke me up, and I rose smiling. I headed back to the living room. "Hey, you," I offered warmly as I threw myself onto the couch next to Sarah, who was already wide awake. She looked at me coldly. "Hey, I better get going." I frowned. "Is something wrong? Should I use a pet name?" I tried to think of one that didn't sound stupid, and I failed at finding one that wasn't stupid. "Sarah?" She threw a look of disappointment mixed with annoyance. "Seriously? I don't like being woken up with kisses on my neck. That was just gross." Sometimes girls say things that really confuse me. You were the one who woke me up when you came to my room," I explained slowly. She scoffed. "I haven't been near your room since you blocked me from going inside yesterday afternoon." My blood chilled. "Wait," I responded with growing fear. "Wait, are you saying you didn't have sex with me in my bed last night?" Sarah gawked at me like I was squeezing pineapple juice from my nipples. "No, Raymond. I assume that's what you wanted when you nibbled on my neck, but I'm not the type of person who has sex within an hour of hanging out." "Well, I am," I yelled, unable to see how I could possibly avoid a panic attack at this point. "Sarah, something came into my room and fucked me last night, and I thought it was you. I did not lick your neck, so something was in here too." My words apparently did not comfort her. "So I just head through the kitchen to find the front door, right?" "Never mind, I'll find my own way out," she answered coldly. I tried to say something in response, but my mouth forgot how to make the words go. Abject terror had completely consumed me, and I was unable to move as she left the room. It was dark last night. What had fucked me? "What the hell?" Sarah screamed from the kitchen. Hearing the fear in her voice kicked life back into my legs, and I was racing after her before processing what was happening. I skidded to a halt next to the trash can. She was holding a prescription bottle that I recognized in a horrifying instant. "Oh, shit." "Are you kidding me?" she asked in a trembling voice. "How many roofies do you have, Raymond? No, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I can't believe I thought you were different. Never speak to me again." She turned and headed to the door as fast as she could. "Wait," I called out. "Why did you think I was different?" That sounded wrong in retrospect. Things were going poorly. The same voice that had told me to let her sleep alone now urged me to race after her, not to give up, because if she left without an explanation from me, I would never get a chance to fix things, no matter how hard I tried. "Please, wait," I called as I caught up to her at the front of the house. "Keep that door closed." Too late. Her hand was on the knob. Then a bigger hand was on the knob, slamming the door shut. Egal threw his weight against the frame, making sure that it did, in fact, stay closed. Sarah looked at him and screamed. "It's okay," I yelled. I promise it's okay. He just shut the door because he follows everything I say. Please calm down." My words were lost in her shrieking, and the tip of my own fledgling panic attack re-emerged like an unwelcome turd. "Please, just hold on." Egal wrapped Sarah in a bear hug, and he held on. She kicked at him with an intensity that should have collapsed the strongest of men, but it seemed apparent at this point that my butler could feel no pain. This was not good. Stop! Stop! Sarah, please just watch. Egal, put her down and eat the roofies in her hand." He immediately dropped her and snatched the orange container from her grasp. Then he yanked off the top and poured several dozen down his throat like they were Skittles. Sarah gawked at him in horror. What the actual fuck is going on? I took a tentative step toward her. "I'm showing you that something supernatural was responsible for all of this," I explained in a shaking voice. "Sarah, that dose should be high enough to kill a bull elephant. But look, Is there anything wrong with him? We stared at Egal, who was now completely frozen. His pure white eyes looked vacantly back at us, as a glob of drool fell to his shirt like honey off a honeycomb. But he did not fall over. Sarah's head pivoted slowly toward me. Her look was inscrutable. I don't know what I expected her to say, but her response terrified me more than anything I could have imagined. "Okay, Raymond," she explained softly. "I'll give you one chance to explain yourself." "Why the hell would you let me explain myself?" I asked stupidly as Sarah placed her hands firmly on her waist and glared at me. "Because, Raymond, you just told me you had a good explanation." She sounded pissed. My first inclination was to respond that believing me was a pretty baseless decision, and that error in judgment was really on her. I didn't say that because I realized at the last second just how fucking stupid it would have been to say that. I looked at my drooling, white-eyed zombie butler, knowing that his stomach was processing an incredible amount of drugs whose effect would be paltry compared to the power of the blue room that had scrambled his brain. There was no way to explain this reality in a way that didn't make me look batshit crazy. I should have just let her go and continued pretending that the demon in my room was actually Sarah, while denying that the real one had slipped through my fingers. "Well?" she asked, cocking her head. With her arms at her sides, her breasts seemed to protrude even more. They were mostly obscured due to her oversized sweater, but that somehow made them even more charming. She didn't try to advertise them, so I knew what I saw was genuine in an honest sort of way. I didn't always want to gawk at D-cups. Boobs could be beautiful at any size, and Sarah's fit her perfectly. They were both prominent in their attractiveness, yet comfortably muted in how natural they fit into her frame. Imagine the most beautiful orange hanging from a sweetly scented tree, waiting to be felt at just the right moment when the season announced, "Now. Touch me now." "You're unbelievable," she snapped, turning around to leave. "But Sarah, I didn't say anything," I exclaimed. "And it took 30 seconds not to say it, Raymond," she answered while opening the door. I pulled my hair in two giant fistfuls as I yelled, "I hate this fucking house!" The knob flew from Sarah's hand as the door slammed shut before her. As we watched, the deadbolt slowly turned and locked us in as the sliding chain lock swung like a pendulum above. Sarah warily turned to face me. "Raymond?" she asked very quietly. Did you do that? Is someone on the other side of this door keeping me here?" "If there was someone on the front porch," I answered evenly, "then how did the chain on this side of the door just lock itself?" She slowly pivoted her head upward as the same overpowering fear consumed us both whole. The chain lock that had been swinging only seconds earlier was now latched firmly in its slot. Sarah jumped back like she'd been burned, hitting Egal and knocking him off balance. He made no effort to correct himself as he pitched forward, heading face first into the banister. With the sickening sound of a cue ball crack, Egal's head bounced off the solid wood and he collapsed to the floor. She covered her chest with her hands. "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she squeaked in the cutest way. "Oh, he's fine," I responded dismissively. "Look, it all goes back into what I was saying earlier about there being a perfectly good explanation. But the man's head..." "Sarah," I interjected in frustration. "He was fine after the roofies. Please don't worry about his stupid head." She squeezed the folds of her sweater. "Are you sure?" Egal suddenly groaned as he climbed to his feet. "There you go, champ," I offered confidently. "He's missing all of his teeth," Sarah pointed out in a voice one octave too high. "He's, actually had pretty bad luck with his teeth. You know how it goes." She glared back at me, eyes growing dark. "No, Raymond, I do not know how it goes. You promised me an explanation that you haven't delivered. To be frank, it seems like this house must be haunted, and that this guy here is somehow unable to feel pain while being obligated to follow every word you say. And it appears that despite how astoundingly clear it is that something is very wrong, you have simply acted like everything is normal. It actually seems to me that you simply ignored what few reservations you had after getting distracted by the idea of hooking up with me. And on top of it, I almost believe that you have absolutely no idea how to handle a situation that you can't admit is completely beyond your control. So tell me, Raymond, what is actually going on? I scratched the back of my head awkwardly. That... She raised one dubious eyebrow. What? That... I folded my arms across my chest. Everything you just said. That's exactly it. You figured it out. I shuffled my feet. I mean, I think it's an exaggeration to say it's completely beyond my control. That's kind of unfair. I coughed. I mean, the rest is pretty much correct, but let's not take it too far. Sarah closed her eyes and pressed her fingertips to her temples. Sarah, She held up one finger. When an irritated girl closes her eyes and holds up a finger, that means shut your damn fool mouth. I'm pretty perceptive about those kinds of things. So I waited for her to lower her hands, take a deep breath, and open her eyes again. And the roofies? She asked severely. Oh, those were his, I explained as I pointed to Egal. I put them in the trash as soon as I could. She carefully folded her arms, letting her fingertips slide into the sleeves. So, was he normal at one point? Oh, yes, I answered, excited that she seemed to be understanding. Well, no, not normal in the strictest definition. Normal people don't have so many roofies. But it was the house that, I gestured to him. Egal's tongue was protruding from his mouth and circling around his lips like an eel, trying to escape a cave that he was trapped in. Right, she pressed. So it looks like we're blocked in, at least through the front door. We can try other doors, but I can't believe I'm saying this. It seems that the house has the ability to lock us in if it wants to. Huh, I answered. She looked at me like I was missing something. How did you get this house? My great-aunt Mary died, I answered quickly because I wanted to show her that I wasn't missing something. Well, what do you know about your great-aunt Mary? She asked, turning her head to the side in that cute way. I answered, nothing. She leaned her head forward and narrowed her eyes at me. Nothing? Well, I know she's dead, I responded. Sarah ran her fingers through her silky auburn hair several quick times in frustration. Raymond, this is going to sound weird, but I have to ask. Did you know that you had a great-aunt Mary before she died? I answered, focusing intently on my fingers. Not exactly. And not exactly means none. At all. She turned and paced the length of the hall before coming back to me and taking a deep, calming breath. So you were just given this house out of the blue, and you had absolutely zero questions about what was going on. I pursed my lips awkwardly. I mean, it makes me sound stupid when you say it like that. And by like that, you mean describing the situation with factual accuracy? I guess so. We were both silent for a few seconds. Okay, she breathed out slowly. Bizarre as this is, I think I'm up to speed. I just have to accept that everything I've ever learned in physics is wrong. She shook her head. But it still doesn't make sense. Sarah turned to face me. You were given this inheritance, apropos of nothing. And we were expected to navigate this bizarre house without any instructions or rules or anything. Exactly, I responded, indignant. I had nothing to go off of. Well, I mean, except for this list I got. A list of what? A list of rules for the house. Her eyes winnowed down to tiny slits. "Raymond," she answered dangerously, "in all the time you've stayed here, have you read this list of rules for the house?" "Yes," I answered defensively. "Not all of them, but like 5 or 6 or 4 out of, I don't know, like a page or so." She curled her fists into tiny balls. "And where would this list of rules be right now?" She continued in that same soft voice. "It's on the floor in my room." "Of course it's on the floor in your room." She nodded. Okay. She breathed in and out methodically, almost as though she were angry about something, was trying to calm herself. "Okay." She gave me a pitying look. "Raymond, we need to get out of this house. You need to never come back. Do you understand me?" I didn't like that suggestion at all because it meant sleeping in my Corolla, which could be dangerous at times. But she was giving me a look that made my chest feel hot and my brain go fuzzy, and I nodded because I didn't think she was inclined to take no for an answer. "Good," she answered slowly. "Let's go." She reached out and took my hand, and my skin tingled where she touched me. Where are we going?" I asked in shock. "The back door's through the kitchen." "We're heading to your room," she answered in a don't fuck with me voice, "because we need to read your goddamn list of rules." Sarah pulled me by the hand through the hallways to my room, using a sharp yank every time I didn't turn exactly where she wanted quickly enough. She snapped my arm even harder when I spoke, effectively cutting me off from talking entirely. It's like she wasn't even interested in what I had to say, and had made up her own mind already. I'm not going to lie. I had thought about Sarah heading eagerly up to my room more than once. Like 80 times more than once. But I had never fantasized about her ripping open the bedroom door and slamming it shut again right away. "Raymond," she said, chest heaving, "I have a question for you." I made sure not to stare at her chest because that had gotten me into trouble before. I really wish she weren't inhaling so deeply, though, because it made very hard to look away. "How long has that message been written across your floor and wall?" she asked in a voice that sounded very fakely casual. I prodded carefully. "Message?" I opened the door a crack. "Oh, yeah." The words, "I will take what I want," were displayed in ash across my room. Each letter was several feet long. I closed the door quietly. "You'll be happy to know that I wasn't the one who wrote it. The message appeared when I thought the room was empty. Secondly, it didn't even say that at first. The words materialized somehow from footprints that someone made while I was sleeping." She pulled her lips into her mouth while her eyes got bigger than I'd ever seen. "How is either one of those things supposed to make me feel any better?" she hissed. I put my hands on my waist. "I'm not sure. At first I thought I would, but now that I think about it..." I was interrupted by a creaking sound in the ceiling above. Sarah and I looked up as the wooden planks whined. The sound traveled down the hallway and crossed over the wall into my room. I looked back down at Sarah to see that her face had gotten much paler. "We need to move," she explained with forced calm. "We're gonna read the rules, follow them closely, and head out any door we can, capiche?" Dang. No fantasy had ever ended with her being done so quickly. "Sure. In and out." She raised one eyebrow at me before turning to open the door again. I could feel the chill wash over her as she walked into my room. The ashen message was rendered much more ominous by the size and silence of the room. With nothing else to see, the presence of the letters was palpable, even when I wasn't looking at them. Here, I explained, walking over to the piece of paper on the floor. Everything we need should be on this page, provided that it's not damaged. Sarah sniffed loudly. What's that smell? It's like burnt ammonia, as though someone urinated onto a wood fire. My face burned. The house makes all kinds of weird projections. Sometimes it's an odd smell, or maybe a sound that has no explanation. The ceiling creaked again, sending a little flurry of dust cascading down. As the sound progressed towards the fireplace, the cloud of dust followed. Raymond, Sarah explained quietly but firmly, I'd really like to leave this room now. Let's take the list of rules and go. I looked at the sooty message again as I shut the door behind me, and I definitely felt like something was watching me back. We walked away from the room. The more distance we put between it and us, the better I felt. Sarah finally stopped once we got back into the kitchen. A series of windows looked out onto the backyard, disappearing into the inky blackness before it reached the Androscoggin River. What the hell? She whispered in the quietest voice yet. Sarah reached out and grabbed my biceps hard enough to cause pain. How long have we been here? It was morning less than an hour ago. How could it be the middle of the night? I pulled out my phone to check the time. I'm not getting any reception. Also, my phone is dead. She quickly whipped hers out as well. Mine too. The glow of the moonlight was just enough for us to navigate our way around the largest objects and appliances. I had taken one step toward the kitchen table when I noticed Sarah reaching for something. I was pretty sure that she didn't know I was looking. She reached into the trash can, pulled out another bottle of roofies, then squeezed it tightly before sliding it into her pocket. Sarah wiped her eye once. I kept my damn fool mouth shut. Hit the lights, she ordered. Let's find out what's actually happening with this horrible list. I looked around for a full minute, feeling stupider with each second that ticked by. I can't find a... How long have you been living here? She shot back. About 2 days. She shook her head and pulled a lighter from her pocket. Come here, let's read this thing. We moved into an adjacent chairs while I unfolded the paper. She ignited the flame between us. It was enough to illuminate the pages, but desensitized our eyes enough to cast the remainder of the room in darkness. Raymond? She asked, turning her face toward me. The flame danced eerily across her skin. Have you altered or affected this list in any way? No, I answered quickly. I've taken really good care of it. Sarah's eyes lingered on me a moment longer before she nodded. Then she cleared her throat and read. Rules for Hill Street House. 1. Never light a fire after dark. She stopped herself. That's bad. What? I asked over the flickering lighter. Oh, the fire. Well, I mean, we've already broken that rule, right? Water under the bridge. Might as well keep going. She looked back at me with a 1,000-yard gaze. How many times have you simply ignored... Sarah closed her eyes and shook her head. Never mind. You can skip to rule number 5. I've already covered the first 4, so we're totally fine there. She took a deep breath and moved ahead. 5. Burn 7 stems of sage in any room before sleeping in it. Any room slept in without completing this process cannot be cleansed. Keep it locked and do not re-enter it. She looked at me. Water under the bridge. Might as well keep going, I answered. 6. The sage cleanse must be completed each time a person sleeps in the house for the first time, no matter which room they use. 7. Take all trash outside the house before sundown. Never leave discarded trash in the backyard. 8. Sexual contact, even mild touching, should never occur within Hell Street House, unless the couple shares a very strong emotional connection. The strength of this connection will be tested each time sexual contact occurs. 9. Lying, or even telling partial truths while in the house or on the grounds will draw negative attention to the liar. "Have you followed all of these?" she asked while pretending that she hadn't gotten nervous while reading the 8th rule. "Sure," I responded. The back of my neck tingled as though I was being watched. "Except rules 5 and 6 because you didn't do a cleanse when I slept here for the first time," she answered quietly. "Oh yeah, except for those." The tinkling feeling grew stronger. Sarah gave me an inscrutable look, holding it for several seconds before looking down at the page again. 9 out of 19 rules down, 10 to go. She took a deep breath and continued reading. 10. Inexplicable pleasant scents indicate benevolent contact. Bursts of air are neutral communication. Cracked wood, plaster, or any other housing material conveys extreme threat. 11. Never say any disparaging comments about Hill Street House, which is sensitive to such offenses. 12. Unanimous anecdotal evidence indicates that glass cannot be broken while inside. If any reflective surface temporarily appears to be cracked, an entity is attempting to breach. 13. The most dangerous type of entity is a living human, which has a physical body capable of doing great harm. Residents should never, at any point, assume they were safe from this paramount threat. 14. If a living person enters the Blue Room at the end of the 3rd floor hall and experiences trauma, they must immediately and permanently be removed from Hill Street House. The longest time spent in the room is 31 minutes and 53 seconds. No record exists of what might occur past this threshold, which proved both fatal and flammable. 15. Entities are almost always unable to take physical form. The rare exception occurs when a resident touches a mental projection of the entity he believes to be corporeal, which can manifest during moments of great emotion, confusion, and intent. Allowing an entity to gain corporeal powers momentarily enables it to be as dangerous as a living human. She stopped and gawked at me. "Any insights?" I shrugged. "Why would I have any insights?" "Well, do you remember having sex with the ghost that walked into your room?" "Oh," I answered quickly. "I suppose that would apply to Rule 15. "Yes," she continued somewhat condescendingly. "We don't want anything to gain physical form if we can avoid it, right?" I thought of the entity that had blown in my ear that first night and shuddered. I think that would be bad." "Yes," Sarah responded emphatically. "Very much so." The door burst open with a loud bang. We leapt to our feet as Sarah pushed her lighter into the darkness. "Who's there?" she called. A low groan met our ears. It was followed by staggering footsteps. I unconsciously stepped in front of Sarah so that whatever it was would meet me first. A head floated into view. It had no eyeballs. My butthole puckered to the size of a pinhead. "Raymond?" Sarah eked from behind me. A man's form pitched forward and Egal collapsed on the ground, unmoving. Was it possible to have a heart attack at age 19? 13 rules ago, I would not have thought so, but I was pretty sure that my circulatory system was crapping out on me. "Raymond?" she repeated, stronger this time. "Rule 15 said that entities are almost always unable to take physical form." "Yeah," I agreed meekly. "Yeah, it's just Egal. No one else." "If it's no one else," she pointed out shakily, "then who put that butcher's knife into his back?" I'm pretty sure he didn't have that knife in his back before, I explained in shock. Sarah gave me a pitying look before flicking out her lighter. She was swallowed up in darkness. Only the pale moonlight from the bank of kitchen windows was now visible. I thought about the term swallowing for a second longer before shaking it from my thoughts. There were more pressing issues at hand. "Why'd you turn off the flame?" I asked. She grunted, and there was a sudden squelching sound. "The house wants us to shut off all fires after dark. Rule 1. Her voice suddenly moved next to me. "Have you considered following all the rules, Raymond?" "All of them?" "Yes." "All the time?" "I think that's the only way they would be effective." I pondered in silence. I guess we could try that. I turned to face where I thought she was standing. "What are you doing?" She held up an object that gleamed in the reflected moonlight. "I pulled a knife from your dude's back. Now I'm going to go test Rule 12. "Is that the sex rule?" I asked as she headed to the window. "No, Raymond," she sighed. "It's not the sex rule. We don't need to test the sex rule." Crack. I covered my ears. "What the hell?" Crack, crack. Sarah gasped. "That's as hard as I can hit. Look, not a scratch on the glass." I leaned forward to see that she was quite right. "The rules say it's impossible to break our way out," she panted. "Do you want to give it a try?" "No, you've seemed to figure out what's happening. I trust that you're right." She paused, but I could not see the expression on her face. Her silhouette looked beautiful in the moonlight, though. A groan emerged from the floor by my feet. Sarah's knife-wielding hand shot above her head. A pale face rose into the light. "It's okay," I called. "It's just Egal." "What?" Sarah screeched. "Raymond, this knife was handle deep in his back." "Yeah," I breathed. "What can I say? He's a trooper." Egal got to his feet, white eyes glowing bright. Then he fell over. "Well, he might not be at 100%, but he's taken beatings that could knock the balls off a Clydesdale. So I think he'll be okay. Ish." Egal groaned. Sarah took my hand very suddenly, and it got all tingly again. "We have to go. Now." My brain got all melty, and I obeyed without question. Once we had moved into the dark hallway, she leaned close. Something about whispering directly into my ear while I couldn't see her made me feel emboldened. But mostly horny. Seriously, it was super hot. "We need to move quickly," she whispered. "Remember rules 13 and 15? "No." "Entities almost never take physical form. How, then, did that knife get forced into his back?" I shrugged, then leaned in closer. "I have no idea, Sarah." Her voice rose even higher, her breaths tickling the inside of my ear. "Rule 13 tells of the most dangerous threat, Raymond. There's another person inside your house." I pulled back in shock as my cold waves of terror raked my chest. "That doesn't make any sense. No one can open the doors to get in." "Raymond, I think he's been here the entire time." I swallowed. "You mean—" "I think he was here when you moved in." We were silent. That silence was far worse than any noise, because we were waiting for the next sound, knowing it would inevitably be a threat, and hearing nothing. Soon I wanted to hear a sound, just to end this tension. Silence. I jumped when Sarah grabbed my fingertips. "We have to go upstairs," she breathed. "Do you remember the creaking noise above your bedroom?" "Yeah," I responded. Little clouds of dust came down below them. "Exactly. How would that have been possible unless there was a physical manifestation?" My breath caught in my throat. "He's been living above my bedroom?" I gasped. "I think so. I'm sorry." "Shit. Do you think he could see me?" I shot back nervously. "I have no idea. Why?" "No reason. None." I let out a slow rush of air. Raymond, I lied earlier, Sarah confessed from the shadows. It wasn't just the rules that convinced me to put out the light. She took 3 short, quick breaths. Whoever stabbed Egal is nearby, and they must have been looking for us. That's why I took the knife. I was scared shitlesser than a prune eater on laxatives, but even that didn't distract from my newfound admiration for Sarah. I mean, what a badass. I'd always incorporated a request of keep the glasses on into my fantasy of her, but I suddenly realized that hold the knife, too, would make its way into my repertoire. Okay, I whispered. I'll lead. Cut the machismo horse shit. I'm packing, she shot back. Exactly. If someone jumps me from the shadows, you'll have to stab them while I'm down. They'll underestimate you. It's the most logical plan. Is it possible to feel a smile through darkness? I think so. I also knew it was best for me to lead because I could navigate my house in the dark, which is how I found out that I can't navigate my house in the dark. It's much more difficult than you'd think. My shins and nose suffered the consequences as I learned that the hard way, and we lost all hope of subtlety with the noise I made. But we made it to the attic. The door stood at the far end of the hallway leading to the blue room. Even facing away from it made me feel dizzy. Though I knew I was upright, my body told me that I was hanging sideways over a precipice, ready to fall down the corridor as if it was a well. My head spun like the time I drank that glass of moonshine without understanding what it was. I wanted to go into the godforsaken attic, if only to get farther away from the room that I could feel, but feared because it was unseen in the darkness. We emerged into the attic. Sarah, I whispered. I've never actually been in here before. We're going to have to use your lighter. I don't know my way around. I was hoping that she'd say, fuck it, and we could run back downstairs to spoon under the covers until the sun came up and the monsters evaporated by magic. But her tiny face sprang to life as she flicked the light on in one hand, while holding the knife close in the other, stepping boldly into the unknown space ahead. I quickly moved next to her, emboldened by sheer proximity to what I could only assume were ovaries of steel. It's massive. And it's empty, she muttered quietly. Our echoing footsteps confirmed this. The place was so large that it sounded like we were outside. I guessed that the attic ran the entire length of the enormous house. We walked. A partial wall emerged before us. Sarah gripped the knife tighter. This corner was the only space that we could not see around. Slowly, we moved past. Sarah gasped. Dirty sheets sat crumpled atop a filthy mattress. Smelly clothes and decaying food crumbs lay in heaps around the disgusting bed. A small propane tank was questionably attached to a rusty camping stove, atop which sat an ancient-looking mug. Sarah looked rapidly around us. My goodness. Holy goat fucking shit, I echoed. I tried to spot what other secrets lived inside this cavernous space, but could see only darkness. Raymond, Sarah whispered. The panic in her voice trickled down my spine. I turned to see her bent over the camp stove. Her breaths came in tiny, short bursts. This mug is red hot. Whoever's been living here is with us. Right now. Hiding in the shadows. It didn't seem real. How could it be real? Have you ever wondered just how easily someone could be living in your home without your knowledge? The thought had never crossed my mind until the evidence was in front of me. Terrified, Sarah reached out a hand. I leaned forward to take it, to hold her close, to earn a full-body hug that might actually do more to address my momentary fear than satisfy other earthly wants. Her lighter went out. She screamed. A heavy thud hit the floor. Sarah! I yelled, lunging into the darkness and instantly tripping on the dirty sheets. I landed softly on what smelled like soiled underwear, moldy strawberries, and a lifetime of bad choices. I scrambled to my hands and knees, then scuttled to where I'd last seen her. I waved my arms frantically in the pitch darkness. Nothing. "Sarah!" I screamed again. "Tell me where you are." My God, the silence hurt. My fingers found the handle of the knife, and I realized just how close I'd come to cutting open my hand while a hospital was unreachable. I quickly dismissed this lesson, once again plunging my hand into the unknown, which is how I found the lighter. I sprang to my feet, hit my head on a low beam, staggered, and eventually realized that I should point the blade away from my bladder while I was stumbling. Then I raised the lighter and flicked it. Nothing. The sudden sound of a shoe slamming against wood echoed through the attic. It was coming from the door leading back down to the hall. I realized that if Sarah was being dragged against her will, kicking might be the only way she had to communicate with me. I ran towards the sound, realizing, but not caring, just how dangerous it was to sprint blindly while carrying a large knife. I was able to stop quickly enough to reduce my impact against the wall. "Sarah!" I called down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, still not being careful enough with the knife. I burst into the hallway to a dizzying sight. A strange figure held Sarah in a necklock with one arm, while using the other to press a carving knife to her cheek. To her credit, Sarah was testing the limits of resistance. They were heading to the blue room at the end of the hall. The hall itself was not inviting. The doors were spiraling in slow circles around the corridor, floating to the ceiling before drifting down the other side, sailing along the floor, then gliding past their original locations. Each door alternated directions, with half going clockwise, the other half counterclockwise. Every survival instinct told me to run downstairs. I dashed forward into the hall. My movements were instantly slowed. I felt like I was running through sand that restrained all body parts equally, like a bad dream where running is crucial yet somehow impossibly slow. The spinning doors wrecked my sense of balance, and I could not move in a straight line. I somehow knew that touching the walls would be a fatal mistake. The figure reached the end of the hallway and opened the weathered door. I opened my mouth to scream. No sound came out. Our attacker pushed Sarah forward. She grabbed the wall, turned to face her assailant, and slapped the stranger across the face. The mysterious figure took advantage of Sarah's momentary imbalance from the slap and pushed her forward. I heard my own scream this time, but it was too late. Sarah fell back into the room. I knew that I needed to stop the door before it was closed. I had to. I pumped my legs. They flowed gently forward. It had to be fast enough. It wasn't fast enough. Sarah disappeared into the darkness and the door closed behind her. Physics became normal once more, and I made it to the end of the hall in 10 steps. I skidded to a stop when I saw the knife pointing at me. I was brandishing my own, preparing for a fight. The figure turned around. I gasped. An old woman with wild white hair and parchment skin turned to look at me with red-rimmed eyes that framed pupils nearly overrun by a milky film. She licked her lips with a dry, alabaster tongue. "You're even prettier while awake," she gurgled. I wanted to lunge, but a bolt of raw fear made me doubt my strength. "Raymond Salak," she crooned. "You're the key. Come give us a hug and a good sniff." "Bitch, I don't know how many stabbings we'll both take before I get through that door, but you can either find out the easy way or shit blood for a month." She lowered her knife. "But don't you want to find out why you're here, Raymond? Do you want to see why this is all happening?" "Oh, I get it. I might be a slow study, but it's clear that pissing in a fireplace pisses off a ghost." "That's right. I piss on things. You want to test me?" I aimed the knife awkwardly forward, ready to strike despite not understanding how to fight. "You want the door? Okay," she gurgled, stepping aside. A headache shot through my skull as soon as the door was visible. "That's your choice. But you need to understand that this house
and all its inhabitants hold much more knowledge than you understand. This isn't about a fireplace. You're the key, Raymond Salak.
She stepped to the left, heading down the perpendicular hallway that crossed the end of the one where I stood.
Follow me now, and you can understand everything. Follow the girl. You'll never come out of that room again.
She turned and walked away. I balked for half a second. There was, of course, never a choice. I opened the door to the blue room and rushed inside. The rules had told me to keep my eyes down. I obeyed and sprinted forward. After running for 30 seconds, it became quite clear that my plan would not work. Physics had been left behind. I had to understand where I was. I looked up. I was in an infant's room. More specifically, it was my childhood room, complete with the solar system mobile above a crib. I didn't hear a baby. Slowly, I approached the edge of the crib's railing, nervous about what I would see, but unable to stop myself. I peeked over the edge. My stomach lurched. Should have been a crib bottom. There wasn't. Instead, an enormous tongue jiggled like a fire hose, reaching 2 feet out of the crib to beckon me. The odor of diapers and rotting meat expelled past the golf ball-sized uvula and physically attacked me as spittle from the tongue splashed my face.
We loved you,
sighed a voice from behind me. I wiped my eyes with a shaking hand and turned around. Behind me stood my parents. They were missing their eyes. Blood cascaded down their cheeks like tears. They stood side by side and would have been staring at me if they possessed the necessary equipment.
We're so alone,
Mom said. Her voice warbled like a bad recording.
Come give us a kiss.
Blood poured across her lower lip. She made no effort to control it. Dad's voice was high and low at the same time, completely synthetic and inhuman.
Kill yourself and rot with us in the ground, Raymond.
I wiped my eyes again, but it wasn't from spit this time. You're not real.
Why don't you love us? They asked in terrifying synchrony. Come into the dirt where it's cold.
I closed my eyes. You're not real. You're preying on my insecurities. I took in several quick breaths. You're testing to see if I can walk away and find her. My voice cracked. I turned from them. My parents shouted. The sound of snapping bones and tearing flesh assaulted my ears. And oh, did they scream.
It hurts so much, Raymond. Why don't you love your mommy and daddy?
I didn't bother to wipe away the tears. There were too many. Was I brave? Brave people don't freely dampen their cheeks, armpits, and underwear at the same time, now do they? You're not real, I whispered to myself. Then I walked forward into the darkness, leaving them behind me. I was alone. What horrible vision awaited me next? Would it be a monster stitched together from all the wrong body parts, or another perversion of my weakest memories? It was dark, and I was alone. I walked. I was alone. My imagination conjured disgusting, terrible agonies injected into the bodies of everyone I loved. I realized the house could pull thoughts from my mind and make them real, so I tried to force my mind blank. That made it worse. Try not to think about a loved one being tortured. Did it work? I was alone with my thoughts. And I realized that this was the torture, because we have more potential than anything else to be our own greatest source of pain. I ran. It was dark. and I was alone. She's not waiting for you. I'll run anyway. Why? Because I'm real as long as I'm moving, but you have no fucking body, so now I'm haunting you. Fuck off. Raymond? Her voice was tiny and terrified, but also hopeful, and the world became real again as I ran toward her in the darkness. As long as I had something to run to, I was grounded, and what lay on the other end was real. Raymond, get away. It's pulling me in. It's not safe to come near me. Get back. Her face emerged into view beneath its own source of light, small and scared and beautiful. She was trapped on the floor, gripping something unseen with strained arms. I can't get out. It's just a trap to get you closer. Sarah, when have I ever followed prudent advice to keep me safe? I yelled as I slid to the ground next to her. I grabbed her arm and she latched onto me like I was a life preserver. It's pulling me in, Raymond. I don't know what it is, but I'm claustrophobic and it knows. The house knows, and it's moving so slowly to drag out my panic, and I don't know how to stop it. Her voice trailed into a quiet falsetto as she lost control of her words. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders, and she seemed so light that I could break her, but even though I'm an extremely stubborn son of a bitch, I knew she was stronger than me. I'm gonna push back against it with my legs, okay, Sarah? No, Raymond. I moved, laying myself against her tiny body and pushing my feet against the void where her knees disappeared into the darkness. My ankles caught in a vice grip. That's how it's gonna be, huh? I turned to face her, our mouths now inches apart. Good news, Sarah. This stupid-ass house just gave me something to push against. I slid my hands beneath her armpits and pushed her away from the void, effectively forcing myself deeper into it. She moved out an inch. I slid in, too. Raymond, it will trap you and keep you here, please. I pushed again. She traveled 3 inches. I slid 6. It's not working well enough, I whispered as the burning edges of panic curled around the limits of my sanity. Burning. Oh, shit, Sarah, this house has a list of rules. She gawked at me like I'd grown an eyeball out of my eyeball. Yes, you really should have not done that to the fireplace, because it gets ornery after dark. I whipped the lighter out and flicked it on. The flames danced in Sarah's lenses. I smiled, and it was the saddest smile. Then I reached for my feet, holding the fire close to the darkness. The void twitched. I turned and lunged at Sarah, pushing her armpits once more and launching her forward with a pop. I yelped in triumph, then tried to crawl after her. I couldn't budge. Slowly, I turned to face what was behind me. The darkness had crawled past my waist. I could neither move nor feel my legs. Sarah, I whispered in a trembling voice. You have to run. It's moving closer. Instead of listening to sound advice, she foolishly grabbed my arm and started pulling. It was about as effective as a chihuahua playing tug-of-war against every tree in a forest. Sarah! Sarah! She kept her grip on my arm but relaxed the pull. It's okay. I squeezed her hand. She looked back at me in complete misery. That expression was quickly replaced with resolve. She dropped my arm and turned around to face the obsidian ceiling. The Dark Tower was a brilliant homage to the books. I cheated on my physics tests. Loads of times. I think that important scientific policy should be decided by likes on Twitter. I didn't understand what the hell she was doing. But the darkness was no longer creeping up my chest. I've never been called a nerd before. Ever. I didn't memorize the periodic table for fun in the 6th grade. The grip loosened on my chest. I strained forward, but budged only slightly. Sarah looked down at me with a mixture of shock and triumph. I didn't secretly borrow my grandma's vinyl, Like a Prayer Madonna records to throw a dance party for me and my stuffed animals every day when I was 11. Sarah, I don't know what the fuck's going on, but I can almost move a little. Her triumph crossed with horror. Then she closed her eyes in steely resolve. She nodded. I'm not a 19-year-old virgin. I've never been tempted to visit r/bites of desire for my needs. The room pitched as though all the gravity had been pulled towards Sarah. I can feel my legs. I'm beginning to push out of here. She was silent. Sarah? She closed her eyes and shouted. I'm struggling in physics, and I'm in no way getting 100 as the top student in the class after religiously checking my ranking. I didn't ask to work on homework with Raymond Salak just so that we could hang out. Sarah, my waist is free. She yelled louder. I don't find myself wondering if his abs taper into sleek curves under those baggy and stylish old t-shirts that are in no way too ugly for him. She took a deep breath. I don't think Raymond is really cute in a scraggly kind of way, and I am not totally convinced that he would be fucking adorable if he just had someone like me to take care of him because he's charmingly and hopelessly helpless. Pop. My right leg is free. I just need to get my left ankle out. She pulled her hair and covered her face with her arms. And he is really, really fucking good at picking up on subtle flirting and figuring out how to respond in intelligent and thoughtful ways. Pop. The emptiness behind me howled as I sprang to my feet. Run! I pitched forward and grabbed Sarah by the elbow as we moved. It followed behind us. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't look. I didn't have to. We sense things indirectly. The inside of a closet sounds different from an empty forest, even in utter quiet. Social tension in a room and the silence before a punchline draw from that same intuition. In short, we feel what's there, even when it's peaceful. This was different. The space behind us wasn't anything. How can you explain what sights exist past the edge of your vision? It's impossible. Because it's not blackness or empty space. It's simply nothing. That was advancing on us. So we ran through the darkness. I held on to Sarah's arm, and it wasn't so bad. We moved forward into the visions. It wasn't my parents this time. It was Adrian Pencer, that dick. He'd punched me in the back of my skull during a freshman orientation party and laughed when I turned to face him. He and his football buddies wanted a reaction out of me. Adrian stood in front of me, kissing a clone of Sarah. Rain came. The wetness seeped into my neck and pelted my head. Some slithered down the inside of my shirt. I slipped in the liquid and skidded to a halt, stopping Sarah beside me. I looked at the ground. It wasn't rain. Falling from the sky were thousands of severed human eyeballs. They were all looking at me, blinking. I turned away and faced Adrian. You can't be with her. She's right next to me. What I'm seeing isn't real. He looked at me and smiled. Erupting from his gums were dozens of shiny metal saw teeth. But I'll take this opportunity to say what I've been wanting to tell you. What your parents should have said long ago about life, death, and your role in it, Adrian Pencer. He raised his eyebrows. Go fuck yourself, shitbag. I pulled Sarah forward and charged headlong into him. There was nothing except a door. I cracked my head on the wood and it bounced open. Sarah and I tumbled into the hall. Fuck that haunted hallway right in his door-twirling eyes. The corridor between the blue room and the stairs leading anywhere but the blue room was an ever-changing shitfest. This iteration, however, brought things to a new level of horribleness. I took 3 steps before realizing that Sarah was no longer at my side. Vertigo rushed through my head as I turned and saw that I had traversed halfway across the hall while she was still at the door. Time and space had dilated. Or, more accurately, I guess that the house had manipulated my understanding of time and space. Either way, I lived in the reality that my brain accepted, which meant that the only truly real thing was the world as I felt it. I turned and moved backwards in 3 impossibly fast steps. Sarah seemed to be caught in slow motion. I checked my watch with one arm and held her soft hand with the other as she drifted slowly, silently forward. Plot twist. I'm also really good at physics and math. It took us 51 seconds to move our 4 feet. If this hallway is, say, 150 feet, it will take us 1,913 seconds or 31 minutes and 53 seconds to get to the stairway. I smiled. I might have agreed to studying just so we could hang out. I've got the second highest grade in our physics class. The slow motion effects prevented her from responding, so we drifted forward in silence. I'm sure the house had intended to make it an unpleasant experience, which proves that even haunted structures can be clueless when it comes to understanding hormonal teenagers. We set foot on the stairs, and time became normal once again. If she wasn't going to let go of my hand on the way down, I wasn't letting go either. Sarah finally slipped her fingers away from me as we bounded into the first-floor hallway, leaning to sprint for the front door. She shook the knob, pounded on the wood, tried to punch through the glass, and finally screamed. "Just open the fucking door and let me out," she sniffled. "Please." My instincts weren't exactly perfect, but they told me 2 things in that moment. 1, Sarah needed a hug, and 2, she didn't want to be touched. So when she covered her face with her hands, leaned against the wall, and slid to the floor, I sat next to her. We waited in silence for a few moments. "So," I prodded carefully, "you said all those things back in the blue room because Rule 9 says that lying will draw attention to the liar and ostensibly away from me while I was trapped. Did I understand that correctly? Because it seemed like the biggest lies diverted the most focus from me to you. You said that I wasn't cute in a scraggly way, which really meant..." Sarah pressed her hand against my mouth, cold fingers pinching my lips shut as she buried her face in her knees. Okay, she didn't want me to bring that up. It was the perfect thing I could say in this situation that would make her feel validated and safe. With so many wrong things, what one magical combination of words would be exactly right? After much contemplation, I kept my damn fool mouth shut. I gently rested my head on her shoulder and delicately took her hand in my own, without forcing it from my mouth. She squeezed her fingers tightly around mine, then pulled our hands to the floor by her feet. It was an incredibly uncomfortable position. I couldn't press too hard on her shoulder without tipping both of us over, which meant that it was balancing my center of gravity just at the edge of my support base. It didn't take a second in the class physics student to know that such a position was unstable and demanded a lot of effort to maintain. I didn't move. Long after my hand and ass cheek had fallen asleep, Sarah let go of me and stood up. I still have this list of rules in my pocket, and there are 4 more to read. I awkwardly got to my feet. Are we going to talk about the list of rules? Yes, I just explained that, she responded, looking me coolly in the eye. I was very confused. Oh, right. My heart sank a little. Then she glanced surreptitiously at my waist, bit her lower lip, looked me in the eye, and gave a half grin. I don't understand why, but my dick and balls got all tingly, like they knew something I didn't. Felt pretty good for some reason, and decided to just go with things. Right. Maybe you should read the rules aloud to get the exact wording, because I'm pretty sure I read them a while back. She slapped her hand on my mouth again. Rule 9, Ray. She used a pet name. I like that. I was tempted to keep talking because I really enjoyed the inexplicable tingle that came when it kind of felt like she was disciplining me. Raymond! I snapped back to look at her. What the hell? You've been staring into space for like 30 seconds while I tried to get you to focus on these rules. I was trying to figure out Rule 9, Raymond. Never mind. She gave me another long look like she was going to discipline me as she was pulling out the rules. I wondered if the trade-off of being stuck in the house with her long term would be worth the benefit, and decided that the jury was still out because one of us still might very well end up being dead or egalled, which would suck. Where do we leave off? She asked calmly. I think we covered 9 of the 12 rules. There are 19, Raymond. We've been over 15 of them. Oh. She sighed. 16. Hill Street House is particularly reactionary to living residents with poignant and unresolved mortality issues, as the ramparts are easily breached here. 17. The house can neither create nor destroy. Many entities were present before all living residents, and those tend to remain after such transient visitors depart. Any novel presences must have been brought in by residents themselves. 18. While each broken rule carries its own consequence, repeated violations will eventually strain the ramparts past a breaking point. If a breach occurs, an old one will have access to consume anything inside the house. This hunt will continue until a key is found. If no key is discovered inside the house, it is suspected that an old one will be able to go outside, with no known inhibitions or restraints. 19. Raymond Salak is the next key. I really, really wish the last rule had more detail, I offered as she finished. Sarah folded the page tightly. You've had this list the whole time? Sarah whispered. You sound angry, I responded in surprise. She gave me another look that made me think of discipline again, which made my brain go all foggy. I mumbled while scratching the back of my head. Well, we learned something at least. I mean, I had already heard that I was the key, whatever that means. Her jaw dropped. How much do you know that you're not telling me, Raymond? She balled her fists in frustration. Who the hell told you that you're the key?
I did,
came a voice from behind her. It sounded like a frog that had been inflated with enough helium to explode its foulness right into our ears. Sarah turned and jumped back, reaching to me for safety and comfort as I was reaching to her for safety and comfort. The woman had somehow gotten uglier since I'd last seen her in the hallway. I swear that her skin was melting off her face. Can skin melt? If so, that's what I was seeing. It was gross. Okay, round 2, I said, reaching for the butcher knife that I discovered in that moment. Must have been sucked into the void of the blue room. My balls froze as she raised a double-barrel Elmer Fudd-style shotgun to our faces. Nuts, I finished.
We're gonna go upstairs for a little talk.
Not a chance, I shot back. We're never going back into the blue room.
Not there, you idiot. I've got everything set up in the second floor study.
I have a study? I asked in shock. The bigger surprise is that the attic squatter has been here long enough to know your own house better than you do, Sarah whispered. Huh, I said.
So, the two of you will march on upstairs, and you can either tie her up, or just let me shoot her, because I can't have this one ruining our chat, the woman hissed. Though I knew it wasn't a good time to be thinking about it, my ears pricked at the thought of me and Sarah tying each other up. Hey,
the creepy old lady yelled.
What is wrong with him? What's so interesting that makes him space out in the middle of conversations?
I looked down narrowly at the woman. There's no reason to shoot anyone, so stop being such a fucking bitch. Why are you so interested in chatting with me? She smiled, revealing several blackened teeth, but did not lower the shotgun.
Because, you foul-mouthed boy, I'm your great Aunt Mary.
I thought you were dead, I responded confusedly.
Do I look dead?
Aunt Mary spat, jowls a jiggle. I looked from her droopy face to her stained muumuu, to the cracked and gnarled fingers curling around the trigger. Yes, I answered. You look like a dead person. Raymond, Sarah whispered nervously, please don't insult the lady holding a shotgun to our heads. She's your great aunt. You should talk to her with respect. Why? I huffed. She's being a total bitch. What kind of a great aunt holds a family at gunpoint? The kind you should be very, Very nice too, Raymond? Sarah answered evenly.
Enough,
Aunt Mary shouted.
Both of you, upstairs, now.
I made sure to stand between Sarah and Aunt Mary on the walk up the stairs to the second-floor study. Aunt Mary stood far back enough so that I couldn't snatch the gun or kick her down the stairs, which was a really smart move on her part because I was hoping to kick her down the stairs. We emerged in a room that showed features of both intentional use and chronic neglect. The cheerful tea set was creepily out of place, sitting on a thick layer of dust that coated a sad-looking desk. One chair sat behind the desk, while another was on the other side, next to a coiled rope. Aunt Mary followed the two of us into the study, closing the door behind her.
Now, tie her to the chair,
she ordered, slurping a large strand of drool like a rogue spaghetti strand.
Then stand on the other side of the desk, where you can't touch her.
We obeyed. I'm going to tie you up as gently as possible, I whispered into Sarah's ear as I leaned forward to pull her hands back. Raymond, do you have a... She cut herself off and stared at my waist. Yep, it was pretty hard to hide a boner of that size. Did you know that some guys actually take medication just for... Literally every word makes it worse, Raymond, Sarah answered through clenched teeth.
Shut up,
Aunt Mary yelled.
You've tied her up just fine, you.
She sneered at me.
Come over here. Not too close to me now. I don't want to have to use Petunia too early,
she cooed, stroking the shotgun. Hands raised, I crossed over to the other side of the desk. Now that I was out of grabbing range, she lowered the weapon slightly and strolled over to the tea set. Confident that Sarah was tied tightly, Aunt Mary reached out and poured herself a cup. Her drinking sounded excessively gross. It was like listening to someone beating a manatee with a larger manatee. I cringed at the thought of us being related. Holy shit. If we're related by blood, I asked with a forced calm, then I have a serious question. She lowered her cup and flashed a smile that conveyed only ugliness.
You want to know about inheriting the house? Of course.
No, it was actually about this night in my bedroom.
You're wondering where I came from, and how it came to pass that you would be the heir to this estate.
No. Well, that's a legit question, but first...
Your grandmother, my sister, wanted nothing to do with me,
Aunt Mary continued as though I hadn't spoken.
And she didn't trust me with this house. She said my intentions were unholy, as though she understands the word.
So you are related to me by blood, which causes me a great deal of concern.
What could possibly be more important than the secrets of this house? She snapped in exasperation. It's one of the most haunted in Maine.
Yes, but there are like 3,000 haunted places in Maine. So, look, I had a visitor last night, and we did the, I looked back and forth from Sarah to Aunt Mary, my face flushing. The wild monkey tumble?
What?
Sex. We had sex, and, I need to know, since it wasn't Sarah, how to ask this delicately. Were there any words in the English language that conveyed the magnitude of my question while still preserving the sensitive respect that decorum demanded? Did you bang me, Great Aunt Mary? She looked at me like I was a fucking idiot.
Don't be a fucking idiot. That's disgusting.
She's right, Raymond. That's a weird question. Like, really weird, Sarah added, a look of great concern on her face. Okay, but, I mean, I had to ask, right? You did not have to ask, Sarah responded with a tone of finality. Don't you remember Rule 15? Rule 9 says not to lie, she droned. Oh, then no. Sarah sighed, slumping against the ropes. Entities are almost always unable to take physical form. The rare exception occurs when a living resident touches a mental projection of the entity he believes to be corporeal, which can manifest during moments of great emotion, confusion, and intent. Allowing an entity to gain corporeal powers enables it to be as dangerous as a living human. So you're saying I fucked a thought into life and it became a ghost? I asked, shocked. Is that any weirder than thinking you had sex with your great aunt? Sarah pressed in disappointment. Well, here's the thing, I explained. I had to check because I didn't think it was her. Look, I said, pointing to Aunt Mary. It's just, Sarah, I thought it was you because the sex was, it felt like, tight going in. Raymond, stop. No, I want to explain why I would never have sex with my aunt. See, it felt really good when I was inside, and the breast just, wow. Please stop. Wait, please, just let me explain myself. It was dark, so I had to go based on feel, and it was like what you'd feel if the taste of candy could be turned into a physical sensation. Each sentence makes it more horrible. Literally, the only thing you can do to stop making it worse is to stop talking. Sarah, this is supposed to be a compliment. When it felt so good, I thought it had to be you, but there was only one thing that bothered me. Do you want to know what it was? No. I had thought that there would be this, an emotional feeling if you and I were to do that. But there wasn't, and it turns out that it's because the ghost wasn't you. The emotional connection was missing. But I assumed the physical touch had to come from you because it was awesome. See, it's a compliment to you in every way. Sarah was beet red.
Boy, are you saying you can't even tell whether you'd fornicated with a human being? Aunt Mary asked in shock.
Well, cut me some slack. It was my first... Then I turned beet red. The silence dragged longer than I'd have liked. I'm quite certain that Sarah would have stomped out of the room if she'd been able. Instead, she finally boiled over like a pot on the stove. You gave your first time to something that you didn't know and couldn't see. Didn't you at least want it to be with someone special? I felt ice cold inside. At the time, I thought it was. That silence was even longer. Sarah couldn't wipe the tear from her cheek. Aunt Mary sighed.
You kids disgust me. But more than that, you're boring. Boo-hoo, heartbreak. It happens every day to children young enough to believe that love is anything more than an excuse to let someone hurt you. Case in point, I think that your grandmother loved me even when I was counting down the days until the cancer finished eating her.
She took another delicate sip of tea.
After she died 3 years ago, I tried to get legal ownership of Hill Street House, but it passed to your parents instead. They were a problem. The car accident was a solution.
Aunt Mary glared at me with enough aggressive malice to wax an orangutan bald. My heart stopped. What? She nodded. You killed my parents? You killed my parents? Fuck you! My life turned to shit after they died. I didn't even realize that I had lunged at her until my chest hit the shotgun barrel. I froze. I breathed. She pushed. All I knew was that I wanted to kill her. Absolutely nothing else mattered. Could I survive a shotgun blast to the chest long enough to strangle that flappy neck until her beady eyes popped? Probably not. But I was ready to try. Ray, Sarah whispered quietly. Please. Against everything I wanted, my rage lessened. My breathing slowed a bit. I stepped back. Aunt Mary's grin spread wide enough to reach the spaces where her back teeth should have been.
Good boy. Now, have a seat.
I fell into the chair. Still pointing the shotgun at me, Aunt Mary pulled open a drawer and procured a few pieces of paper.
Unfortunately, your parents' death meant that you ended up with a piece of history that you're far too young and stupid to appreciate.
I wanted to respond with something clever, but I could only see red. I needed to hurt her, and nothing else could occupy my attention.
It took months before I finally decided to convince you to come live here. I assumed that you'd want to sign over possession shortly after going inside, like any sane person would. Makes sense, right?
She took another sip of tea, followed by a disgusting sigh of satisfaction.
But what did you do instead? You ignored every warning sign that would have driven reasonable people away 10 times over. And my God, dear boy, is there a rule you haven't broken? Did you see it as some sort of a challenge instead of a warning?
I tried to think clearly, but the anger was too great.
So I said, fuck it. Even you'll be able to understand this.
She threw the papers at me, then tossed a pen into my lap.
This is the deed to Hill Street House. And that's a transfer of ownership. It's already been filled out and just needs your signature. Sign it, or I'll kill you.
I die happy knowing that my last act was to piss you off, you sack of donkey shit. I spat. Her eyes grew dark. Then she wheeled a gun to the other side of the desk. Sarah screamed. No, don't shoot her. I'll sign the damn paper. I'll give you the house. I'll actually bang you. Great Aunt Mary turned her shotgun around and pointed it at me.
You'll do what, boy?
My mind buzzed. Everything was wrong. Trying to grasp a thought was like attempting to catch a piece of a sandstorm. If that's what it takes for you to not hurt her, then I'll do whatever you say. Look, I've just gotten a lot of new information that's really hard for me to process right now. I took a deep breath. We can start with you not killing Sarah. Or, by the name of everything holy and unholy in this house, I'll break so many goddamn rules that closet demons will ejaculate on your grave for 100 years after you die and go to hell. She lowered her jaw, sending those quivering jowls on a jelly-like shaking spree.
Are you on drugs? You look and sound like you're on drugs.
Then she lowered the shotgun. So I guess I kind of won that round. But I was still seeing red, so each sentence was a struggle. Look, I huffed through clenched teeth. I have this deed here, and this transfer of ownership as well. I lifted both papers from the desk. I will sign them under the condition that you shove each one so far up your ass that boogers tickle the corners. She flashed a nasty smile.
You're much less boring than your dreadful grandmother. I guess your parents were moral failures that the world won't miss.
Everything went red. Raymond? Ray? The voice confused me because it was the only part of my existence that wasn't hurting. I turned around to see Sarah still tied to the chair, looking evenly forward. Ray, I want you to listen to me, she said in a soothing but firm voice. You're going to sit down, and you're going to be okay. I need this because you're a very special person to me. Do you understand? I didn't understand. Then I turned back around and I understood. I had cornered Great Aunt Mary.
The house goes to me if you're dead,
she whispered, wild-eyed. She was smiling and silently daring me to move another inch. The barrels of her shotgun were digging painfully into my neck. She was a twitch away from killing me. Raymond, I'm going to walk out of this house with you, and we're going to have a lot of good days together. But I need you to sit down. I turned back to face her again, unable to comprehend how she was keeping so calm. That's when I noticed the line of tears falling softly down her cheek. She'd held them back just long enough to get the first few sentences out. Sarah knew she needed to be strong for both of us in that moment. I understood this without knowing why I understood this. "I'm so angry," I whispered. "I know, and that's okay. I promise it's okay. Raymond, as long as you sit down." My eyes were heavy and red hot. My face felt like it was melting. "Everything I loved is gone, Sarah. I feel so empty so much of the time." "I know," she pressed in that intoxicatingly calming voice. "It's not fair. And it's okay to hurt. But you're not empty. And if you saw what I see in you, then you would let go of the anger for just a little bit and have a seat." My shoulders relaxed. My feet moved as though someone else were controlling them. I turned around and walked back to the desk. I sat. Even though her eyes were filled with tears, or maybe because of it, Sarah's smile was the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. "I'll sign the papers," I responded numbly. Sarah had flipped a switch in my head. The intensity of emotion had passed like the crashing of a gargantuan ocean wave, leaving an eerie calm in its wake.
"Good,"
Aunt Mary panted.
"Either way, the house is mine now."
I read part of the deed. "The owner of Hill Street House shall be its key, and therefore most able to effect breaches, for good or for ill." Oh. I looked over the transfer papers. That's when the footsteps began.
"What the hell?"
Aunt Mary shrieked, wheeling around to point her shotgun at the door. My bizarrely calm mind compartmentalized things. If anything broke through the door, that was Aunt Mary's problem. If it killed her and came for me, at least I'd have the joy of watching the bitch die as my final experience. I read the details of the transfer. I, Raymond Salak, hereby transfer ownership of the property at 1913 Foreside Road, and all buildings, titles, and obligations pertaining thereto, to Mary Salak. Huh. Well, ain't that some shit? "Raymond," Sarah cried. "What?" I asked distantly. "The footsteps are right outside the door," she screamed. Aunt Mary was focused on the entrance to the room, eyes blazing and shotgun ready to obliterate whatever man or entity decided to knock. I understood that there wasn't enough time to untie Sarah, though I could hop over the desk and put myself between her and the winner of this shotgun duel. So, I leapt valiantly across the furniture, caught my leg, and face-planted on the floor. Ow. I looked up in time to see the knob turning. My breath stopped. Slowly, the door creaked open, and a figure emerged from the darkness. Aunt Mary's shotgun roared to life, my ears recoiling in agony. Egal screamed and bounced into the room like a pinball. "Don't shoot him!" Sarah screamed. But it was too late. She'd blown a chunk of Egal's skull clean off, exposing a coiled mass of gray and white brain spaghetti to the outside world. His left eye was still intact, but the bone socket around it had shattered, revealing the optic nerve and twitching muscles.
"Yes,"
he mumbled.
"What in the name of Beelzebub's butthole is that thing?"
Aunt Mary yelled as she lined up her second shot. "He won't hurt us, and I don't think you can kill him," Sarah pleaded. "Watch. Egal, come over here and sit on the floor." He spun his head around, sending a spray of blood droplets across the wall. Then he took 3 long steps forward, went rigid, and fell to the ground like a tree, cracking his face on the floor. Aunt Mary scowled at me.
"I don't know what you're doing to my house, but I don't want that thing."
"It's fine," I responded measuredly, rubbing my throbbing forehead as I stood up. I took a deep breath. I signed the papers. The house is officially yours. Her eyes grew wide as she rushed to the desk. I followed her, leaving Sarah with Egal. Aunt Mary lifted the documents, hands shaking, and read them closely. Triumph dawned on her ugly expression. You have everything you want. Can you let us go? She ignored me, reading the words over and over as though she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I waited patiently before prodding her once more. So I'm going to untie Sarah and leave you here in hell if that's okay with everyone, I said while gently moving away from Great Aunt Mary.
No,
she answered flatly, pushing past me and grabbing the teapot.
No, she babbled, precariously pouring a cup from the shaking spout. You will stay here. You'll both do nicely. Yes.
She blew on her drink and took a steady, long gulp. Lowering the cup, she smiled.
It's finally mine. I can't believe it,
she whispered. I opened my mouth to yell at her when an upstairs door slammed shut. I paused. When I was about to speak again, another door slammed. Closer this time. Sarah, who else is in the house? I asked shakily. Whoever it is, she answered nervously. They're coming down the hallway from the blue room. Slam. Great Aunt Mary, you're a bitch, and your face is aggressively disgusting, I explained calmly. But I'd rather all of us live than all of us die. So let's pack up and head downstairs. The room got very quiet. Then she sneered at me.
No. I don't know what you have planned, but I'm not falling for it. We'll all be staying right here.
Slam. You know we can all hear it, right? I huffed in frustration. The doors are getting louder and closer, and we're quickly running out of time to do anything about it. If we just move downstairs, we'll buy some time to figure things out. She scowled at me.
Nothing's happening yet. I'm not falling for your hoax.
Slam. She raised the shotgun and pointed it at my head.
You never appreciated what this house truly is, stupid boy,
she slurred.
You never wondered what makes it so special?
She lowered her weapon like it was very heavy. Slam. Aunt Mary pressed on the shotgun as though it were a cane.
Idiot boy. Should have known I could never let you leave here after I admitted a crime. But you're weak.
She stared at the floor while she talked.
Weak like all your family.
She staggered, catching her footing at the last second.
Do you want to know what the biggest secret of the house is?
She asked, leaning against the desk. Slam. My heart was racing fast enough to leave me gasping, despite the fact that I was standing still. Aunt Mary looked disoriented. Did I have enough time to snatch the gun? Or was this a trick?
Creak.
Raymond, Sarah hissed.
It's at the stairway. It's coming for us.
The shotgun clattered to the ground. Aunt Mary reached precariously downward, arm shaking back and forth as she tried to maintain her balance with great effort. Then she leaned over, pitched forward, and collapsed to the floor. I froze. Surely this was a trap. Right? I looked up at Sarah, who was smiling in victory. My man Egal, coming through with the roofies in her tea.
Nanarg,
he mumbled from the ground. Sarah, your brain is the single hottest thing I've ever encountered, I cried as I dove behind her chair and I scrambled to untie the knot. We have a problem, I gasped. I really, really thought I made these binds loose, but... Step, step, creak. Raymond, she whispered, her voice shaking like a leaf. It's right outside the door. You don't have enough time. She turned around to look at me, her face paper white. Run. I looked up at Sarah's soft brown eyes and could actually see her heart breaking. You really think the most reasonable choice is that I leave you here to die? I whispered. She closed her eyes, swallowed, and nodded. It's okay, she sighed. Creak. Sarah, I asked evenly, when have you ever known me to take the reasonable choice? I lunged at the chair, using my momentum to grab the arms and lift it off the ground with Sarah still tied to it. Raymond, she shrieked. What are you doing? Something stupid, probably, I grunted, staggering around the room. Egal. Open the goddamn door. I could hear him, but seeing anything was nearly impossible. My face was buried in Sarah's shoulder as I marched forward with all the lopsided grace of a three-legged cow. My foot landed on something hard. A series of angry cracks and pops erupted beneath my foot.
Ouch, you bitch bastard! Aunt Mary screamed. You shattered my fingers!
Sorry, I didn't know you were there, I apologized. I ground my foot into her hand, feeling more ancient bones crackle and pop one at a time. This time I did know, I explained over her wails. This one's on me. I heard Egal opening the door and stumbling into the hallway. His groans only echoed down one side as though the other side had ceased to exist. I leaned forward and ran into the hall. Things were blurry after that. I didn't see much, so I turned away from the source of the creaking and sprinted. Oh, God, Raymond, it's in the hall. You don't understand what I'm seeing. Run! I moved as fast as my quivering legs would carry me. It's going into the study right now. Close your eyes, Sarah. Don't look at it. I panted in complete exhaustion. Aunt Mary screamed. My arms and legs burned past the limit of what I thought I could endure. And then I went faster. Crack! Aunt Mary screamed. That sounded like an arm bone, Sarah gasped. Crack, crack! And a couple of leg bones. The screaming reached new heights, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Crack, 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 crack. Splorch! It sounded like someone was spilling an entire jar of mayonnaise off a balcony. Aunt Mary was immediately silent after that. That's when the doors started slamming shut one at a time behind us. Whatever was shutting them could move much faster than me. Slam, slam, slam. There's a small staircase around the corner, I huffed. I can jump down it. Do not jump down the stairs. I can do it. Don't do it. Slam. The door right next to me flew shut, a sharp gust of air licking my neck. I leaned around the corner, bounced off the wall, and leapt down the staircase. Slam! One foot landed 6 steps down. I kept flying as the next foot skidded 7 steps. Then the stairway turned on a landing. I had forgotten about that. Unable to stop my momentum, I crashed into the wall. The chair erupted in a crack. I turned and fell down the final 6 stairs, hitting the floor painfully hard. I instantly shot up to see Sarah gently sliding down the final steps of what remained of the chair. With the wood broken, her right leg was now free. I could see to the landing, but the stairway turned to the left and went up from there, obscuring my view of our pursuer. Its shadow, however, was quite visible. It didn't just block the light, it seemed to absorb it, casting a swath of nothingness in its presence. Just before it emerged into view, Sarah reached out her leg and slammed the door shut. I leapt up and turned the lock on the doorknob. That's how I discovered I'd broken a finger in the fall. Shit, pig, fuck farts, that hurts, I screamed. Crash! The presence shook the entire door in its frame. I watched as the knob turned slightly. It stopped when it met the resistance of the lock. And that's when the knob began to smolder. Then the door changed from brown to black as though it was being burned from the other side. I lunged at the knife block on the counter, grabbed the biggest one I could find, and collapsed on Sarah. "Give me your arms," I screamed. She thrust them toward me as the door started melting, an acrid stench billowing into the dark kitchen. I quickly cut through the remainder of the ropes and pulled Sarah to her feet. We ran as the door began to splinter. "Which way?" I yelled. "Follow me. We'll put at least 3 locked doors between us and it." We weaved through the enormous ground floor, surgically choosing a path that would slow it down. Neither one of us believed it would stop the thing permanently. We sprinted around a final corner to the front entrance. "That door won't open," Sarah wailed. "None of them will." I tried anyways, because that's how I am. And you know what happened when I attempted to open the front door? Nothing. Of course, Sarah was right. Crack. I let go of the knob. "It's coming," Sarah explained softly. We were running out of places to run. Crack. I don't know if I took her hand or she took mine, but our fingers were suddenly intertwined. We backed up to the extra living room that sat directly below my bedroom because that was the farthest corner of the house. There was nowhere left to go. Crack. "I'm going to try breaking a window again," I explained in desperation as I flew at the large glass window that was centered in one wall. The pitch-black outside world lay a tantalizing half-inch away. I punched the glass. That's how I remembered I'd broken a finger. When I was done screaming, I tried simply opening the damn window. That didn't work either. Crack. "The rules," Sarah called out nervously. "The rules have us trapped here, so they're all we have to get out." She looked at me in borderline panic. "There has to be a solution. Rule 13 says humans are far more dangerous than entities, right? We can find a way out of this, right? Think." I quickly drew a blank. Her eyes grew wide. "The list says that all current evidence points to glass being unbreakable, but wood and plaster can be destroyed in the case of an extreme threat." Crack. The threat can't get any more extreme. And humans are not the most dangerous predator right now, I wailed, staggering toward her in the center of the room. Sarah looked at me with eyes that I can only describe as blazing. "We have to test the house, Ray. We need to do what it says should never be done, and see if it sees us as an extreme threat." "Sarah," I responded, baffled. "I have no idea what..." Then she was kissing me, and it was like falling up into the warmest flying bed of illogical zen. I'd always assumed kissing was done only with the lips, but I was so wrong. Our bodies molded into one another like each had found the missing piece they didn't know existed. Her fingers pulled my hair, and I pulled her waist into my hips as we swam through a warm, wet haze of wondering why we had never done this before, or if we would ever get to do anything else again. Bam! Sunlight burst through a fresh crack in the wall. Pop! Crunch! The house's wooden frame jolted. Pop! 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 Angry holes erupted up and down the wall as it began to crumble. More and more sunlight spiderwebbed around the solid window in the center of the wall. Sarah grabbed my hair painfully tight and pulled me closer, as we finally expressed what words simply lacked the power to convey. This house might actually have been hell, but I didn't want to be anywhere else in the world. And then the window shattered into a million sparkling fragments all at once, instantly vaporizing into a snowy rainbow of light as the morning sun penetrated every corner of the room. It was the single most incredible thing you could imagine, but wasn't worth sparing even a moment to stop and watch. Kissing Sarah topped staring at her boobs. It was better than I had imagined during my solitary personal practice time, which mostly consisted of skipping this part and picturing the amazing 2 minutes that would come next. This was just so different because I was experiencing a new dimension of emotion. Like part of my brain hadn't awoken until just then. Maybe there was a lot more to learn than what I knew at age 19. 13 on the list of rules explained that humans were far more dangerous than any other haunt. In that vulnerable instant, I realized just how much power Sarah wielded over me. I finally understood. I was terrified of the intensity of the moment, and I ran headlong into it. Crack. Shit. An otherworldly entity was still chasing us down. That fucking cockblocker. We needed to run outside or risk whatever obliteration had caused Aunt Mary's body to sound like the popping of an Apatosaurus zit. But I really liked the way her stomach felt against my crotch. Crackle, crackle, brick, boom. Sarah was so soft and warm. And then I realized that her feelings were just as strong as mine. There wasn't any real logic. I could just sense it, radiating off her body in lightheaded defiance of hard-edged science. She didn't want to break away either. Was it up to me to overcome my lust, turn away, and rush outside to safety? Shit, we were gonna die. The floorboards started to shake. No. If this was what the first kiss felt like, then I was hell-bent on experiencing the 1000th. I pulled back and she gasped, eyes closed, leaning into me. I know it's hard, but we can start again in 10 seconds, I promised. And I took her hand and ran toward the open window. Together, we jumped into the sunlight. I realized that Sarah was probably not very athletic, meaning that I would have to hold tight and keep her upright as we landed. I didn't want her to hurt herself. My foot caught the ledge as I sailed over. Sarah landed gracefully on 2 feet, but I pulled her hard into the grass as I collapsed. We tumbled painfully over one another. After rolling to a stop, she lay on my chest, both of us panting. "Sarah," I gasped. "I tried to keep you from hurting." "Shut up," she whispered with more than a hint of desperation as she leaned in to kiss me again. "Oh, the scream interrupted before we could get started, and we both turned to see Egal sprinting toward the broken wall. "Hey man, jump outside before it's too late," I screamed at him. My instructions were poorly timed. He soared into the air, tripping over the same ledge that had caught me, and nosedived into the grass with all the beauty of a shattered windmill. Immediately after he landed, a thick black coat covered the window, obscuring everything inside. But the darkness did not breach the broken wall. I reached for Sarah's breast, but she grabbed my wrist and forced it to the ground. I whimpered. "Are you okay, Egal?" she asked gently. He stood up and faced us, or, well, he sort of faced us. We were looking directly at his chest, but his head was pointed at 10 o'clock. "Looks like you twisted those vertebrae pretty bad, buddy," I noted. "Yeah," he replied. Then Egal turned around and we both gasped. A large stick was protruding from his temple. Combined with his milky eyes, white, poofy hair, lack of teeth, exposed optic nerve, and missing chunk of skull, he looked quite the mess. "Hey man, why don't you take the morning off and finish that Cedar Mountain ice? You earned it. But leave a couple for me, okay?" "Yes," he bubbled. Since Egal was perfectly fine, I turned back to Sarah. For a fleeting second, I completely understood how a person could succumb to an addiction so powerful they'd take another hit, even at the cost of their own life. "Ray," she asked tentatively, "did you really never notice all those times I was touching my hair? The way I grazed your arm when I asked to study together? The fact that I wore a sweater that you once stared at for 10 minutes even though it was 75 degrees last night?" I looked at her in genuine confusion. Maybe. Why do you ask?" She pressed her face into my neck and hugged me tight. "Ray, I have so much to teach you," she huffed in desperation. I didn't have any idea what that meant, so I leaned in to kiss her, because I seemed to be much better at that than I was at talking. "Good morning, Mr. Salak." The voice boomed from above just before my lips met hers. "Again with the cock-blocking," I yelled. "My balls are blue enough to inspire a B.B. King album, so what is so... Oh, it's you." The man stared down at us, still dressed in a long, black trench coat despite the morning warmth. Hi?" Sarah squeaked from above me. "Hello, miss," he responded politely. He glanced back and forth between me and Sarah, who had a very awkward look on her face. "Don't get up on my account." Well, shit, that's exactly the sort of thing that made me feel like I had to get up on his account. I stood up and helped Sarah to her feet. It became apparent when I was dusting the grass off my pants. "Look, I see it, okay? We don't have to talk about my boner again." Sarah's eyes grew wide as she stared at the two of us. The man extended his hand and gave a crooked, chiseled smile. "Cognitor advocatus, executor of Mr. Salak's estate," he explained crisply. "Well, not exactly," I huffed. "Turns out that my great-aunt Mary, who wasn't dead, took ownership." I crossed my arms and turned away. Sarah gently reached for my hand and pulled it into her own. I calmed down before realizing I hadn't been calm. "I see," Mr. Advocatus continued in an even tone. "So you're in possession of documentation proving a transfer of ownership, then?" "Well, I mean, no." He paused for half a beat. "Should I anticipate any proof that public records need to be changed? Or that there is a living person who might challenge your name on a copy of the deed?" I opened my mouth to speak just as Sarah squeezed my fingers. Without saying a word, I understood perfectly what she communicated. "Raymond Salak, know when to keep your damn fool mouth shut." "I see there is a bit of structural damage," Mr. Advocatus noted lightly, staring over our shoulders. "Fortunately, the trust fund comes with a comprehensive insurance plan." We turned around to see destruction on full display. Most of the living room wall was gone, leaving behind a Swiss cheese pattern of broken wood around a gap in the center. Sunlight illuminated every corner of the room. "Wait a minute," I interjected. "The wall was covered in darkness just a minute ago. How can I see inside?" "That's an interesting question, considering how thoroughly you've studied the rules," he continued monotonously. I explained. "While each rule broken carries its own consequence, repeated violations will eventually strain the ramparts past a breaking point." Sarah took over. "If a breach occurs, an old one will have access to consume anything inside the house. This hunt will continue until a key is found. If no key is discovered inside the house, it is suspected that an old one will be able to go outside with no known inhibitions." I fell for her again in that moment. "It seems that the old one couldn't go outside," she continued. "If, hypothetically, a key had been found, would the old one be obligated to return from whence it came after searching the house?" Mr. Advocatus smiled in silence for a few seconds before speaking. "I don't claim to know all the secrets of Hill Street House," he explained, "so I have no reason to assume you're wrong. But if I were you, I would check for a sign of benevolent contact to make sure. There are more than just old ones within, and they retain varying degrees of power and intent." He turned to look at me. "I do strongly advise against any further rule breaking." I shifted awkwardly in place. "In fact, I think we'll have to make 2 adjustments," he noted. "Up until now, unanimous anecdotal evidence had indicated that glass could not be broken by humans. It seems that is, in fact, feasible in the most extreme of circumstances." Sarah's face flushed, and she suddenly became very interested in her shoes, but she did not let go of my hand. And the other? I asked. Mr. Advocatus raised his eyebrow. You said there were 2 rules to add. His lips grew thin as he sighed. It must be made very clear to all persons in the house that urination should only take place in a toilet. Ah, I responded. Good to know. Sarah and I headed for the front door after he departed, which was unlocked and opened quite easily. She moved ahead of me into the entrance hall, which looked entirely different in the warm sunlight. Suddenly she turned around and smiled. What? I asked, unable to suppress her contagious grin. She breathed deeply, closing her eyes. Did you notice? She asked, looking at me in just the right way to change my knees to jelly and have the opposite effect on my crotch. It smells like rose petals. I'd have loved for Sarah to move into my mansion then and there, but she's a take things slow type of girl. It drives me crazy, mostly because I realize that's in both our best interests, and I hate how much I love knowing that she understands what's best for me. So for the time being, Egal and I share the house with whatever the fuck else also exists here. There's no sign of either the old one or Aunt Mary. We maintain a steady balance because Sarah makes sure I obey all the rules. She's even added a few of her own. I'm not allowed to have mayonnaise or beers, more than 50% of my diet. And she made me buy laundry detergent. School's much easier when I don't have to worry about being broke, so my grades are fucking lit. But I'll never be able to catch up with Sarah. The best part, though, is that every time she comes over, Sarah lets me see her boobs. They're fantastic. I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you again to the author of tonight's story, P.F. McGrail. Please check out his book on Amazon, Do No Harm, Learning the Rules of Residency. And he's also a very prominent author on Reddit, No Sleep. And I'll include a link to his username in the description below, as well as a link to his Amazon page. Please check out his work and give him some love. Thanks everyone for listening to tonight's story. If you got to this point, hopefully you enjoyed it. And I'm looking to do more of these long series all in one long video. So if you enjoy this, please give a like, a comment, share it with others, and really helps out the channel to help me grow the channel. I really appreciate you guys helping me out with that. Alright, my voice is dying after doing this 15-part, I think, series. So 15, 16 parts. So anyways, have a good night, everybody, and I'll see you again in a couple days, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks a lot. I gently rested my head on her shoulder and delicately took her hand in my own without forcing it from her Wait, what? My balls froze as she raised a double bearer. Did you bang me, Aunt Mary? Each sentence makes it more horrible. Literally, the only thing you could do is stop making it worse. The man extended his hand and gave a crooked, chiseled smile. Cognitor Avocatus, executor of Mr. Salak's estate, he explained crisply.